Chapter 749. Preparing to build a workshop. Gu Chungrui sat down and played with their son. Then, he asked about the situation in the village. He learned that Feng Chun not only kept planting the wild roses and wild jujube well, in the spring of last year, he planted many roses in the nearby mountains. It was almost time to harvest those roses this year. He also opened up some mountainous areas and planted sweet potatoes, broom corn, soybeans, and other crops. Now, he brought people to open up a cornfield. Gu Chungrui reminded her, if the newly opened land is not fertile enough, plant soybeans and sweet potatoes first. Only use last year's land to grow corn. Corn is relatively more needy for good soil. Also, it can be substituted for flour and rice. Is corn that good? Of course. I'm mainly in charge of agriculture in the capital. Besides, I've seen the planting techniques that Mother God gave us when she bestowed seeds. I see. I'll tell Feng Chun later. Machem, since you guys are doing well, I'm relieved. I'll go back now. Gu Chungrui stood up. Wait, it's not easy for you to come here. You should at least eat here before leaving. Gu Zishan said as she hugged her son. It's fine. You guys are so busy. I'll come over again when you're more free. Gu Chungrui politely refused, turned around, and walked out. Update on Biomicron X0VL. Siamicron then, he went straight to the restaurant in town. Boss, you're here. Zhaoqing immediately greeted him when he saw him enter. Are you the manager now? Gu Chungrui nodded and asked. Just temporary. It's still manager's son managing most of the restaurant. Then where did he go? He said he was going to visit a manor. He should be back by noon. Visit a manor? Yes, manager's son said that it's not stable for our business if vegetables are always bought from outsiders. So he wants to buy a manor to grow vegetables for the restaurant. That's pretty good. Gu Chungrui nodded in agreement. Then, he asked about the situation at the restaurant. After learning that business was good, he went to the back. When Sun Hongliang came back and learned that Gu Chungrui had returned, he immediately went to the back and bowed. Master, you're back? Gu Chungrui put down the teacup and poured him a cup. Ah, thank you, master. Sun Hongliang replied and sat down. Noticing the tea was not hot, he drank it in one go. Gu Chungrui saw that he was really thirsty, so he poured him a cup and asked, I heard that you went to visit a manor. How was it? Is it suitable? It's okay. It's 500 acres of high-quality farmland and close to the town. The key is that there's an independent water wheel inside that can be used to water the paddy fields and dry land. It's just a little expensive, costing 6,000 taels of silver. It's indeed a little expensive. That's 10 taels of silver per acre. Yes, I want to stretch it a little more and see if it can be lowered. If it's suitable in all aspects, don't stretch it too much. By the way, did you buy the wasteland that Zhouing asked you to buy? Gu Chungrui asked. I bought it. However, it's a bit far. It's 100 acres of land at the bend upstream of the river. Gu Chungrui quickly remembered when he heard him say that. Wasn't that the piece of land where Zhou Huaiming was rescued? The terrain there was high, and there was a certain distance from the foot of the mountain. It was very safe, but too far away and a little troublesome to transport stuff from there. After that, Sun Hongliang voiced his thoughts. I was thinking of directly crossing the river and using a small boat to transport the goods. As long as it's not too far away, it won't be a problem. It's good that you have an idea. After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he told him that Zhouing wanted to open a vermicelli workshop, a tofu workshop, and even a chili oil workshop. After that, the cook served 4 dishes. The two of them chatted about the details as they ate. Chapter 750. Spoiled. In the afternoon, the two of them went to the empty land together. Gu Chungrui drew a simple map and gave a detailed plan of the land to Sun Hongliang. They'll stay here for at least 7 more days. You can look for craftsmen. If there's anything you don't understand, you can come and find me. Oh, right, there's also the well. Let's dig out the well first before we build the workshop. Understood. They'll arrange it tomorrow. Sun Hongliang nodded. On the other side, the patriarch and his 2 sons began to inform the others after they had arranged the matters at home. It was already late in the afternoon after Gu Qingxi had informed everyone. However, he did not go home. Instead, he bought some gifts and went straight to the Bai family. In the end, He was told that Mrs. Bai had already brought the child back, so he could only put down the gift and rush home. When he reached home, he saw Mrs. Bai sitting in the courtyard with the child in her arms and eating melon seeds. Her mother and sister-in-law were busy in the kitchen, and even her eldest brother was sitting at the kitchen door and picking vegetables. Gu Qingxi's expression immediately turned ugly. He went forward to carry the child. "I'll take care of the child. Go help out in the kitchen. I have to treat Brother Rui to dinner tonight. It's such a small kitchen. I can't even move my feet if I go in." Mrs. Bai raised her head and said coquettishly, "Then take over the work from Big Brother." Gu Qingxi's face darkened. Ever since he passed the imperial examination last year, she has been a little arrogant and picky about everything. He did not expect that she would go even further now, suppressing even her mother and brother. After saying that, he did not even give her a chance to explain. Instead, he carried the child and went straight into the house. Update on Biomicron X0VEL. Siomicron and Mrs. Bai looked at his dark face and swallowed the words that were on the tip of her tongue. She got up and went to help. When Gu Chunjin saw this, he finished picking up the fungus in his hand. He got up and returned to the house. "What are you doing? You just came back, and you're already throwing a tantrum. She doesn't know what's good for her. If we don't reel her temper in, she might cause some trouble in the future. By the way, where's father?" Gu Qingxi asked. "Mother said she went to find a chef. She should be back soon." "Oh." Gu Qingxi nodded, and the two of them discussed the people to be notified, how to arrange the seats for that day, etc. Not long after, the patriarch rushed back. Then, Gu Rui carried 2 roast chickens and wines from Hongyun restaurant and rushed over. When the patriarch saw this, he said to Gu Qinjin, "Qinjin, make a trip to call Chengye, Chengxi, and Qinglin over too. You brothers can have a gathering." "Aye." Gu Qinjin responded, got up, and ran out. Gu Rui put down the wine and asked, "Uncle, how's the preparation for the banquet the day after tomorrow? If you need any help, just let me know." "It's almost ready. You and Chengye have to wake up early the day after tomorrow to help us greet our guests." "No problem. We'll come over early in the morning. By the way, are we still holding it outside the ancestral hall?" "Yes, it's spacious. If it's not enough, there's still a grain-crushing field at the side." After chatting for a while, the patriarch asked about their situation in the capital. Knowing that they were living well, he gave them a few more pieces of advice. He mainly told them to keep a low profile so that they would not be targeted. Soon, Gu Qinjin brought Gu Chengye and the other two over. Gu Chengxi stepped forward and introduced the patriarch to Gu Chenglin. "While I shouldn't be your direct uncle based on the family tree, you can still call me your uncle now that your surname has changed to Gu." The patriarch sized Gu Chenglin up. "You sure look like your mother, fair and handsome. I heard that you also passed the elementary scholar exam last year?" "Uncle, I did pass, but my results weren't too good. I only got 28th place." Gu Chenglin replied with a smile. Chapter 751 Throwing a Tantrum. It's already not bad that you can pass at your age. Don't belittle yourself. However, you have to work harder in the future and strive to be a top scholar as soon as possible. Thank you for your kind words. Gu Chenglin replied. The patriarch then asked about the situation of the siblings, and then everyone chatted for a while longer. Soon, dinner was served. After all the dishes were served, Mrs. Wang and Mrs. Fong left. Gu Chengrui saw that they were going to take Xiaoduzi away and said, "Auntie, let Xiaoduzi stay. A boy will need to grow. It's good for him to meet some people." Yes, let Xiaoduzi stay. He won't be shy around everyone in the future." The patriarch looked at Gu Chenglin, who was magnanimous and not restrained at all. He waved at Xiaoduzi and arranged for him to sit between him and Gu Chenjin. The little boy shyly stared at Gu Chengrui and the others. He grabbed Gu Chenjin's sleeve and leaned against him. The patriarch looked at his meek appearance. He made up his mind to bring him out to meet people more often in the future. He could no longer stay in the hands of a woman. At this moment, Mrs. Bai came in with a plate of washed wine cups. She placed it on the table with a bang, then picked up her son and turned to walk out. Mrs. Wang and the patriarch's faces darkened. To put it bluntly, this banquet was held for Gu Chengxi and their family, yet she was giving the guests a hard time. Mrs. Fong saw this and quickly went forward. After distributing the wine glasses to them, she saw Gu Chengxi and Gu Qinglin and asked, Chengxi, Chenglin, do you want a drink? It's fine, cousin-in-law. We'll just drink some tea later. Gu Qinglin laughed. Update on Biomicron X0VEL. Siamicronim Gu Chengxi nodded. All right, we'll make you a pot of tea later. After Mrs. Fong finished speaking, she opened the wine that Gu Chengrui had brought and poured it into a pot before pouring a cup for them separately. After filling the wine pot, she turned around and cooked a pot of sour plum soup for the two of them. Mrs. Wang's expression became a little better, and then she left with Mrs. Fong. Come. This is the roast chicken that Chengrui brought back from Hongyan restaurant in town. Let's eat it first before drinking. After Gu Chengjin finished speaking, he gave the 4 drumsticks to Gu Chengrui and his brothers. As for the 3 of them and Xiao Duzi, they each got a chicken wing. The patriarch smiled and picked it up. Yes, everyone's been busy for the entire afternoon. Let's eat something first before drinking. After finishing a chicken wing, he raised his glass and said, Come, Chengrui. Uncle will toast you. Thank you for taking care of my 2 sons this time. Uncle, you're too polite. You've helped us a lot in the past. We're all family, so there's no need for you to thank us. Let's toast and wish Qingxi a prosperous career in the future. Gu Chengrui raised his glass. Yes, congratulations on becoming a scholar, Brother Qingxi. Please give me your guidance in the future. Gu Qingxi echoed. Everyone followed suit and raised their glasses. You brothers should get along well, support and supervise each other. The patriarch smiled and blessed them. Everyone quickly responded and drank. While they were eating, the patriarch told them about the situation in the clan and emphasized the point of unity more than once. An hour and a half had passed since the meal started. After sending Gu Chengrui and the others off, the patriarch looked at Gu Chengxi. You better take care. If she's still so impolite and can't be seen on the stage, then don't bring her along when you take office in the future. She'll ruin things for you. Chapter 752. I'm just afraid. I know. Father, we'll take a look before deciding. Gu Chengxi burped and staggered back into the house. After a while, there were sounds of quarreling, hitting, and even the cries of children in the house. Xiao Duzi was so scared that she went straight into Gu Chengjin's arms. No, I have to bring the child over. No matter what, we can't scare the child. After Mrs. Wang finished speaking, she hurriedly walked over. When she entered the room, she saw the 2 of them still fighting and noticed the child about to fall off the bed. She rushed over and picked up the child. She shouted at the 2 of them, Are you still worthy of being parents? Can't you see how the child is crying? Hit more. You'll know to stop when it hurts. Mrs. Wang huffed and carried the child back to the main room. After that lecture, the couple who were arguing stopped fighting. Gu Chengxi sat down on a chair and panted heavily as he drank his tea. Mrs. Bai sat at the head of the bed and cried for a while. She questioned angrily, Tell me, are you looking down on me and want to climb up the social ladder? Who did you hear that from that I want to climb up the social ladder? Gu Chengxi asked in surprise. Isn't that obvious? Back then, didn't Chun Pong. Don't compare me to that animal. Update on Biomicron X0VEL. Siamicronim do you dare to say that you will never leave me for the rest of your life? That will depend on your attitude. If you continue to be so unreasonable and condescending, then it will really be hard to say. Gu Chengxi said, Let's talk about it first. What right do you have to look down on others? Don't forget, I'm only a 3rd grade scholar. There are a lot of people above me. It wasn't easy for Brother Chengrui to arrange for me to be a 7th grade county magistrate. It was still too early for me to climb up. Besides, even though Brother Chengrui doesn't really walk in the officialdom, he's a 3rd grade official appointed by the late emperor and the current emperor. He's 4 grades higher than me. He's at a height that I won't be able to reach in my lifetime. Furthermore, he's the son of Princess Pingyang. There's also Chenglin. Although he's just a scholar, he has an older sister who's consort Xian. To put it bluntly, he's the emperor's brother-in-law with a status much higher than ours. As for Brother Qingye and Chengxi, although their achievements are a little low, they have helped us a lot. As for father and big brother, they are our direct relatives. I don't expect you to be very filial to them, but you shouldn't have thrown your face in front of them. Who are you acting out against? He looked at her aggrieved and unwilling expression and snorted coldly. Don't tell me that you feel wrong just because I asked you to do a little work. Am not, I. Think about it carefully. We'll go outside to sober up too. Gu Qingxi stood up and was about to leave. Don't go. When Mrs. Bai heard this, she immediately stood up and pounced over. She hugged his waist from behind and sobbed, I was wrong. I shouldn't have embarrassed you in front of everyone. I won't dare to do it again. Don't divorce me. What are you thinking about all day? When did I say I would divorce you? I am just afraid. Ever since you passed the scholar examination, everyone around you has said that I'm not worthy of you and that you might not want me anymore at any time. I even heard that after you pass the imperial examination, you might be taken in by a wealthy young lady. So, that's why I deliberately look down on this, look down on that, and talk about power. This way, they'll be afraid of me and won't dare to say anything else. Mrs. Bai started crying after explaining her reasons. Chapter 753 fooled Gu Chengxi was stunned. However, after what happened to his sister, he believed that his parents, eldest brother, and sister-in-law would definitely not look down on her. What's wrong with you today? He asked. It's impossible for our family to say such things. I just saw that your status is getting higher and higher. So, Gu Qingxi was momentarily speechless. He felt that she was quite stupid. She clearly felt a sense of crisis, so why didn't she want to resolve it? She didn't want to get close to her family and instead did the opposite. Wouldn't that just make everyone hate her even more? Who's the one who's been whispering nonsense to you every day? She asked. My old friends, as well as the ladies in the town and county. They always said this every time they invited me to a gathering. Mrs. Bai said. When Gu Chengxi heard this, he recalled how everyone had surrounded him and introduced him to all kinds of women after he passed the imperial examination. His eyes darkened. They're trying to sow discord between us. You've fallen for their trick. Huh, how could that be? Why not? If we divorce or if I get rid of you, they will have a chance to marry me, right? Mrs. Bai was stunned for a moment and looked at him in disbelief. However, when she saw his serious expression, she couldn't help but smile bitterly. Remember this, as long as you don't break the family rules, I won't divorce you, Gu Qingxi said seriously. Update on Biomicron X0VL. Siomicron, so just be confident. If you're so paranoid, you have to think of something else to do. Also, you have to believe me. If I really had that kind of heart, I would have divorced you long ago when the Gu family was exonerated. Besides, I have brother Rui to help me in court and consort Xian to support me. I don't need to climb up the social ladder through marriage. However, you can't stay at home forever in the future. You have to be good at social interactions with the madams and young ladies. Each of them had a gut that could turn 18 corners. You need to learn how to deal with them, especially about rumors like this. You have to be calm. If you're not sure of anything, you can ask me. Don't easily make promises outside, and don't promise anything to anyone. If they can't be rejected, let them come to me. Mrs. Bai became nervous after hearing this because she felt that she could not handle it at all. The gap between her and him was getting bigger and bigger. She had to learn well. Otherwise, he might get bored of her at any time. Can I learn well? Can you find someone to teach me? When Gu Chengxi said that, he thought of nannies. Those people might be servants, but they were smart when dealing with people. It seemed that he had to find a way to hire a nanny to follow and guide his wife. He told her his thoughts. Over the next few days, you should learn more from Mother and Sixth Aunt Gu. If there's nothing else, you can find your sister-in-law Qingji for a chat. Although her father's official position is not high, she is still a proper official's daughter. She will know a lot. I understand. Yeah, don't be silly anymore. If your family hates you, do you think your life will be good? What do we do now? Turn over a new leaf. It's good that you know your mistakes and change them. Mother and sister-in-law are not petty people. As for where we are, I'm here. Don't worry. I understand. We'll go pick up our son now. Mrs. Bai smiled and nodded. Silly girl, don't be stupid in the future. Go to bed early afterward. We'll go talk to Big Brother. Gu Chengxi turned and walked out. Chapter 754, Giving an Idea Outside. He saw his eldest brother helping his sister-in-law wash the dishes in the kitchen. He walked over and said, "Sister-in-law, go and take care of Xiao Duzi. He'll take care of this." Mrs. Fong was stunned momentarily and knew he wanted to chat with Gu Chunjin. She put the work in her hands down and said, "Well, all right, after you're done, boil some water to wash up." "Got it." After Gu Chengxi finished speaking, he took over her job. "Have you said everything?" Gu Chunjin turned his head and asked. "I've said it, but whether she changes or not is another matter." Gu Chengxi replied with a headache, because he could see clearly that no matter what he said, his wife still felt inferior in front of him. This was not something that could be changed in a short period of time. "Brother, how do you think we can make her more confident?" he asked. Gu Chunjin paused for a long time after hearing that. He had seen her arrogant look previously and thought she had looked down on them because of Gu Chengxi's rise in status. After all the fuss, she was the one who felt inferior, but she used arrogance and disdain to cover it up. He lowered his head and pondered for a moment. To put it bluntly, she just felt uneasy. It would be fine if you let her feel at ease. Of course, relying on words and promises is useless. Update on Biomicron X0VL. Siomicron M, you have to use practical actions to reassure her. For example, Gu Chengxi hurriedly asked. Gu Chunjin went silent for a moment before saying, "Take some time every day to teach her something or tell her about your life outside, especially things that can inspire her. Only when her horizons are broadened can she keep up with your thoughts and your relationship be firm." Just like Cheng Rui and his wife, it could be said that they are of one heart and one mind. They supported each other, so that's why they could go further than anyone else. I also heard something about them that made me very impressed. After that, he told him how they rejected King Kang's previous offer to send people to their residence. Although they were rash, they understood each other's intentions, which was why they could force King Kong away. If it were another couple, the husband would not dare to fight back. As a wife, she definitely wouldn't dare say that. Firstly, she was afraid that her husband would complain. Secondly, she would fear that she would offend King Kong and cause trouble for the family. That's true. It seems that we haven't communicated enough. Indeed, they are like an old couple. They can tell what the other person is thinking from their eyes and actions. You're making me a little envious. So, think about how you two should get along. On the other hand, after returning home, Gu Qinglin said, "Brother Chengrui, cousin Chengxi's wife can't do it. She's too rash. She'll definitely bring trouble to him in the future." You're thinking quite far ahead. However, this is a matter between them. It's best if we don't interfere. Moreover, they are still their parents. If there's anything, they will come forward to resolve it. However, Mrs. Bai was indeed a little petty. I hope she can change as soon as possible. Otherwise, they won't be able to go far. Sigh, everyone wants to be an official. It's not that easy to be an official. How many officials have died in the past 2 years? Therefore, an official must be clear-headed. There are some things that can be touched and some things that cannot be touched. Oh, then what are those? Gu Chenglin asked curiously. Let's put it this way. You can't touch military expenses, the money for imperial examinations, disaster relief, or essential construction such as the river embankment. If you touch these, something will happen sooner or later. If something happens, all your money will be confiscated, and you and your family will be exterminated. Chapter 755, Preparing, right? Other than rebellion, these are the most serious crimes. The key is that these are also the fastest and most coveted ways to earn money. Your father and the first prince are mainly suffering because of this, so this silver must not be touched. Then, Gu Chengrui used a pot to brew some chrysanthemum tea. The two of them drank some water and went asleep. They woke up early the next day and went to the old mansion for dinner. Gu Chengrui saw that the old madam had also woken up and was quite tidy. "Grandma, you're not going to help too, are you?" he asked curiously. "That's right. It was not easy for us to produce a scholar in our clan during the past 100 years. No matter what, I have to go over and help today." Madame Chow replied cheerfully. Mrs. Yao saw this and walked over. Chung Rui, hurry up and persuade her. Your grandmother's health is not very good. How can she be exposed to the wind and sun outside? That's true. You should stay at home. You can go over and join in the fun tomorrow. Gu Chengrui echoed. Indeed. Grandma, just listen to us. Young people like us will be watching over the banquet preparation. Gu Qingye echoed. What's going on? What are you guys talking about? At this moment, Mr. Gu rushed back from outside. Gu Qingye told him about Madame Qiao's intention. Mother, there are many people there, old and young. You won't have any work to do. You should rest well at home. Now that you're back, it's true that there's no need for me to go. Update on Biomicron X0VL. Siamicronim, by the way. Where are Guji and your second son? They will be there soon. We also heard the news of Chengxi and the others returning and rushing back overnight. Hurry up and wash up. Mrs. Guo, please cook for 3 more people. After Madame Qiao finished speaking to Mrs. Guo, who had just finished washing the dishes, she turned around and returned to her room. Father, this is Chenglin. He has changed his surname to Gu Chenglin. Gu Chengrui pulled Gu Chenglin out from behind him. Of course, I remember him. I brought him lots of food and toys when he was young. I just didn't expect him to grow up so quickly. Mr. Gu smiled and pinched his little face. Uncle, you're pinching my face again. Gu Chenglin dodged and complained. Haha, you still have the same expression as when you were young. Mr. Gu's expression turned serious. It's good that you changed your surname. You'll be a child of the Gu family from now on. If you need anything or suffer any grievances, just tell your 2 uncles. I understand, Gu Chenglin said. After a few polite words, Mr. Gu went in to wash up. Soon, second Uncle Gu and Gu Chengji rushed back. After some pleasantries, Gu Chengrui and his group of 4 went to the ancestral hall first. At this moment, outside the ancestral hall, the clansmen had already set up a stove. They then set up a simple tent with cloth and grass curtains. The 4 of them quickly ran over to help. Not long after, the women in the village rushed over and helped prepare the banquet, especially the steamed buns, pork knuckles, and braised beef. They needed to prepare things in advance. Everyone was busy for a day. Of course, they also prepared some simple dishes for lunch and dinner to entertain everyone. The Gu family members had all changed into clean clothes early the next morning. They began to wait in the village to welcome guests from all over. The first to arrive were Sun Hongliang and Manager Liu. However, after the 2 of them put down the gifts and the 2 chefs that had been sent over, they went straight back to town. Following that, as the patriarch had guessed, many uninvited wealthy people came. Of course, all the married girls in the village, especially those from the Gu clan, refused their entry. For a moment, the village was filled with welcoming laughter mixed with the noise of the children. Chapter 756 Gratitude Banquet 1. When it was almost noon, Bai Jingping and the other officials were finally here. Of course, Gu Chengrui was a 3rd-grade official, after all, so he did not go to welcome the guests. Instead, he, Mr. Gu, and second Uncle Gu helped the patriarch entertain the guests near the ancestral hall. Bai Jingping and the others were led in by Gu Chengxi. After arriving, he immediately came over and bowed. I am Bai Jingping, Tian Jingzhong. Greetings, Lord Gu. The 2 of you, please get up. We have really gone through thick and thin together. Everyone, there's no need to be so polite. Gu Chengrui stepped forward and greeted them. Also, I haven't congratulated the 2 of you for your promotion. Same here, same here. How long do you plan to stay this time? Let's meet up when you're free? Bai Jingping suggested. No problem. I'll go to the county town when I have time. Let's have a good gathering at Hongyan Restaurant. Gu Chengrui replied. We'll be waiting. Bai Jingping laughed. After saying that, he politely greeted Gu Chengye and went to look for Gu Chengxi, the main character of the day. Hello, brother-in-law. Gu Chengrui walked up to Constable Zhang. Hello. I heard that sister-in-law is pregnant. Congratulations. Update on Biomicron X0VL. Siamicronim, same to you. We weren't around when you got married. Come to our house after you're done with your work in the afternoon. No problem. We don't plan to go back today, and have plenty of time. That's good. Let's gather around and talk. Otherwise, meeting each other again in the future won't be easy. That's right. At this moment, the village chief walked over with a few other village chiefs nearby and bowed. Then, he invited them to sit down and said, "Everyone, sit down and have a cup of tea." Third brother, let me do it. After Feng Chun finished speaking, he took the kettle from his hand. The village chief saw that Gu Chungrui did not put on any air. He smiled and asked, "Chungrui, you're back? How many days can you stay?" "After Chengxi leaves, we'll be going back too. Grandpa Qian, do you want to go to the capital with me to see how prosperous the capital is?" Gu Chungrui smiled. The village chief quickly shook his head. "No, I'm old. I'm afraid I won't be able to return here after a trip to the capital." Gu Chungrui sized him up and saw that his expression was not too good. No wonder he did not see him yesterday. "Grandpa Qian, are you feeling unwell? Do you need me to take a look at you?" she asked. "That will be great. I just feel that these old bones are getting useless." I'm panting after walking a distance. After the village chief finished speaking, he coughed twice and took a sip of tea before handing his hand to him. Gu Chungrui took his pulse and said, "It's not a big problem. In the future, eat more Chinese yam, jujube, and wolfberries. Basically, your weakness is caused by insufficient blood and energy." He didn't say that Grandpa Qian was almost at the end of his rope, which was why the weakness and malnourished look. He could still live for 2 or 3 years if he cared for his body well. Otherwise, it was hard to say if he could even live past the following year. To put it bluntly, it was because of the disaster a few years ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't suffer such a blow to my health. The village chief replied helplessly. Indeed, those elderly in those years were either dead or injured. It wasn't easy. At this moment, a village chief echoed, "Yeah, in those few years, not only did the elderly not eat well, but they also lacked medical care. It was not easy for anyone to survive." "Oh, right. What kind of crops are planted in the nearby villages?" Gu Chungrui asked. "Our village mainly produces sweet potatoes. In half a year, we can also plant some corn. Our village also mainly plants sweet potatoes. We also found some rice seeds and plan to plant them in the future." After exchanging pleasantries and everyone sat down, a woman walked up to Madame Wang and said, "Madame Gu is so blessed. Your son has passed the Jinshe examination at such a young age. His future will definitely be bleak." "Madame Tian, you flatter me. I was just lucky." Lady Wang smiled. "You're too humble. I have a niece in my maiden family. Although she came from a merchant family, she's literate and can manage her own shop. Do you want to matchmake them? He's already married and has a son who's not even 2 years old. So I think we should forget about this matter. No matter what, he's still a county magistrate. Isn't it too rare for him to have a woman inside and outside? I don't think it will be chaotic if there are too many women. Besides, we're from a small family. We really can't afford to raise so many women. I think we should forget about it." Madame Wang saw that she still wanted to persuade her and saw that there was a guest at the door, so she immediately went up to greet him. Chapter 758 Gratitude Banquet 3 Sister Bai, how many words have you learned recently? You have to hurry up and learn more. Otherwise, if you can't read even an article, how can you help Lord Gu manage his residence? Mrs. Bai looked at her friend and was furious. Wasn't she just mocking her for not being worthy of her husband? However, she recalled what her husband had said before and smiled. "There's no rush. Chingxi is teaching me personally. He said he would also spare 25 minutes daily to teach me. Also, accounting is not a small matter. You have to learn it as soon as possible. Otherwise, how can you manage the food in the residence?" Indeed, Chengxi said that he would definitely teach me within half a month. It won't delay anything. Don't worry. That's good. Oh, right, you have to learn royal etiquette quickly. You'll use it when you socialize in the future. Don't worry. Chengxi said that he would teach me slowly in the future. No matter what her friends said next, Mrs. Bai replied to them with a smile and said Gu Chengxi would teach her. The women around her were envious, jealous, and hateful. However, There was nothing they could do. They couldn't possibly sow discord between them, right? At the same time, they also realized that she was no longer feeling inferior or impatient. Instead, she looked happy and trusted, annoying them. Mrs. Bai looked at them, and her nervous heart finally settled down. When they were distracted, she left with the excuse of entertaining guests. Update on Biomicron X0 VEL. Siamicronim. Just as she got up, she met Mrs. Yang's gaze. She stepped forward and asked, "Sister-in-law Chengji, did you see what happened just now?" "Yeah, you handled it well." Mrs. Yang smiled. "If it were you, how would you deal with it? To be honest, they have belittled me so many times. I'm really sick of them." "You did very well just now. The more they say that, the more you talk about how sweet you and your husband are, what he gave you, what he did for you, and so on. Once they get annoyed, you can find all kinds of excuses to slip away. If you really can't, just ignore them. In short, don't panic. Once you panic, they will succeed. I'm afraid this kind of thing will happen more in the future. You have to practice the ability to hide your emotions." It sounds so difficult. So, don't look at those madams and young ladies who seemed all glamorous. However, practice makes perfect. You'll get used to it after a long time. At the same time, several people approached Mrs. Fong, Gu Zi, Sixth Aunt Gu, and even Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao to inquire about Gu Qingxi's marriage. Mrs. Fong and Gu Zi directly refused to interfere. Mrs. Liu and the other three did not want to care. Instead, Mrs. Yao picked and chose, wishing to set up a marriage for Gu Chengxi. Of course, she was not interested in the lowest-ranked ones, and the highest-ranked ones were not interested in Gu Qingxi's status as a concubine, so they could not conclude in the end. During this time, Mrs. Bai's in-laws also heard the news that someone wanted to stuff women into her son-in-law's house. They immediately went forward and argued, almost causing a ruckus. After sending all the guests away, everyone was tired. After Gu Chengxi finished his work, he saw Mrs. Bai walking over with a long face. "What's wrong? Did someone say something to you again?" "No, but there are quite a number of people asking about you today. There are at least 8 families. More than that. I think there are more than 20 of them. Fortunately, we all rejected them. Be careful when you speak and act outside in the future. Don't let anyone catch you." Mrs. Wang walked over and said. Chapter 759 Chatting. I will be careful. Gu Chengxi nodded solemnly. To be honest, some still took the initiative to offer him women today, but he rejected them all. No wonder Mrs. Bai was so paranoid all day. To be honest, if it were him, he would also be angry. It's good that you understand. In the future, if there's anything, you can discuss it with me. It's inconvenient for us to interfere, and we can't even interfere when you're in your new place. After Mrs. Wang finished speaking, she waved her hand and let them go. After they left, Gu Chengxi was so tired that he lay on the bed. On the other end, after Gu Chengrui brought Constable Zhang home, he made some tea before asking, "Brother-in-law, how's the family recently? Are the children getting along well?" "It's pretty good. The children are sensible, so we don't have to worry much." "Oh, right. I heard that Zhouing is pregnant. How many months is she along now?" Constable Zhang asked. "She got pregnant on New Year's Eve. It's been almost 4 months now." "That's great to hear. It's just in time for the end of summer and the beginning of autumn. The weather isn't that hot anymore." "Indeed, we specially calculated these days for comfortable weather during the delivery. This can be calculated? Of course, as long as there are no problems with both parties' bodies, they can give birth whenever they want." After Gu Chengrui finished speaking, he even taught him how to calculate. Constable Zhang's eyes lit up after hearing that. He really did not expect that there was so much knowledge about giving birth. Update on Biomicron X0 VEL. Siamicronim. It seemed that he had to go back and put it into practice. With 2 children together, their relationship would be more secure in the future. After that, they started to chat, from home to politics. On the other end, Sixth Aunt Gu was also pulling Gu Zi to ask how the couple was doing. Gu Zi blushed and replied, "It's good. My mother-in-law doesn't meddle, and the 2 children are quite sensible." "Phew, I can tell from your appearance that you're doing well. We can rest assured now. However, you have to hurry up and have another child. Otherwise, your relationship will fade as time passes. It's hard to say when you're old. Sixth Aunt Gu smiled. Yes, you have 2 daughters now. It's better to have a son by your side. You'll have a filial son when you're old, and it'll be more lively in your later years. Mrs. Yao echoed. When the others heard this, they persuaded her to give birth to 1 or 2 more children as soon as possible. Sorry for making everyone worry. I will remember this. Gu Zi smiled. On the other end, after Gu Chengrui sent Constable Zhang off, he locked the door and went to his old home. When he entered the courtyard, there was a wave of laughter. It turned out that Gu Ziqiu, Gu Zishan, and their children were all there. What are you talking about? Why are you having such a good time? He asked after entering the house. Chengrui, you're here. Come and take a seat. We're playing with the children. It's quite fun. Second Uncle Gu waved at him. Indeed, 2 or 3-year-olds are the cutest. Madame Chiao chuckled in agreement. Gu Chengrui smiled as he took out some coins from his wallet. Here, half a tael each. Take them to buy candy or something delicious. Thank you, third uncle. Gu Chengzi's son, Gu Jiehao, took it and smiled. Not bad. You still remember third uncle. I will bring you to the county for a big meal another day. Gu Chengrui said. From the sound of it, you'll be treating everyone? Mr. Gu said. That's right. In 2 days, we'll have a gathering with Lord Bai and Lord Tian. Gu Chengrui nodded and continued. Eldest brother, second brother, you should come. Help me accompany them to drink. Chapter 760 Suggestion. That's exactly what I want. It's also beneficial for us to build a good relationship with them. Gu Qingye replied. Gu Qingji would not refuse after hearing this. After all, getting to know more influential people would definitely be helpful to their business in the future. Next, Gu Chengrui mentioned his plans for the harvest of chili and sweet potatoes after autumn to everyone so that they could plant more appropriately. Gu Chengrui accompanied Gu Chengxi to the county town's dental clinic, buying 2 nannies and 2 servants who knew martial arts. On the way back, Gu Chengxi asked, Brother Chengrui, is vermicelli selling well? Can you open a shop in Pingyang province? That way, the people there can generate some income. You want everyone to plant more sweet potatoes? That's right. It's all plains over there, and there's no pier for docks. We can only rely on a variety of crops to make a living. We can open a shop, but as you said, there's not even a decent dock there. It's probably inconvenient to transport the goods. Therefore, the quantity we get would be not much. However, there were benefits to being on the plains. The land on the plains is generally more fertile and more accessible for harvest. In my opinion, why don't you think of a way to harvest seeds? This way, the overall income of the people there will increase by a large margin. Seeds. Yes, the seeds of any crop will degenerate after a long time. However, with good land and proper management, as long as we pick plump seeds every time, we can slow down the degeneration of the seeds. Update on Biomicron X0 VEL. Siomicronim then, you can sell the seeds to other places. It's much more cost-effective than selling the grain alone. Also, you can plant chili and cotton. I can accept these. As for potatoes, let's wait a little longer. They'll look for you when we expand there. Gu Qingxi nodded thoughtfully. After returning home, Mrs. Bai led the servants she had bought to Gu Zi's house. Gu Chengrui took advantage of the fact that no one was around, and they parted ways to give Gu Chengxi 5,000 taels of silver. Take this. When you take office, you'll have to make arrangements for everyone. You'll have to set up a livelihood. It'll definitely come in handy. I don't want it. This is too much. Take it. Just treat it as a loan. Just return it to me in the future. But don't be greedy. Yang Zhiqing is an example. He didn't have a good ending. Don't worry, I have my morality. My little brother will be my reminder. Okay, we'll go back then. After Gu Chengrui finished speaking, he turned around and walked home. Gu Qingxi looked at the silver notes in his hand and felt they weighed 1,000 pounds. At the same time, he silently remembered this favor in his heart. After returning home, Gu Qingxi told the patriarch about this matter alone. The patriarch was stunned for a moment. Keep it. Just like he said, When you get there and buy some property, it will at least be enough for your expenses. It also saves you from worrying about your livelihood. Also, I must remind you again that you are not allowed to be greedy. After all, a monthly salary of 10 taels of silver is not enough to do anything. Whether for social gatherings or peace of mind as an official, they could not do without silver. However, there are only 200 taels of silver left at their home. Even if he gave them all to Gu Chengxi, he could only buy a few sets of clothes to support his appearance. I know, father. I want. Gu Chengxi nodded solemnly. Over the next few days, Gu Chengrui either went to the manor to help or followed son Hongliang to the workshop. 5 days later, after he was almost done with his family matters, Gu Chengrui treated the people in the manor to a meal at noon and gathered together. The next night, they gathered at Grassland Taste Restaurant and invited manager Lu to have a good meal together. Chapter 761 The Death of Madame Qiao. The day before his departure, Gu Chengrui brought Gu Chengye, Gu Chengji, and his son to the county town to treat the county officials to a feast. On the day of departure, Gu Chengrui and Gu Chenglin had just packed their luggage when they suddenly heard a hurried knock on the door. Gu Chengrui immediately ran over and opened the door to see Gu Chengxi standing there with red eyes. Before he could say anything, Gu Chengxi said anxiously, "Chengrui, it's a good thing you didn't leave. Grandma doesn't seem to be able to make it. You should go and take a look." "What happened? Wasn't everything fine last night?" "I don't know. She suddenly collapsed. You should hurry over and take a look." "Chenglin, let's not pack up yet. Let's go and see Grandma." Gu Chengrui turned around and shouted. After he came out and locked the door, they ran back to their old home. Before he entered the door, he heard waves of crying. Gu Shengrui's heart skipped a beat, thinking it shouldn't be so fast. "Chengrui, you're here. Hurry up and check on your grandmother. Why did she suddenly collapse?" Mr. Gu immediately waved at him when he saw him. Gu Chengrui had no choice but to run a few steps. When he entered the house, he saw Madame Qiao lying on the bed. He quickly went forward to take her pulse and do a comprehensive examination. "Father, prepare for the funeral." "What? What's going on? Why is it so sudden?" Update on Biomicron X0VEL. Siomicron M, a cerebral hemorrhage means that the blood vessels in the brain have ruptured. I can use acupuncture to wake Grandma up and see if she has any last words. When Gu Chengrui said this, he asked Mrs. Huang for an embroidery needle and quickly stabbed Madame Qiao with it. A moment later, Mrs. Qiao woke up. She first looked at everyone in confusion. Finally, she looked at Gu Chengrui. "Chengrui, am I not going to make it?" She could clearly feel that her limbs were no longer under her control, and even her head felt highly uncomfortable, as if it were covered in a thick fog. "Machim, if there's anything you need, just tell us. We'll do our best," Gu Chengrui said. Madame Qiao smiled and said, "Take out the small box in my bed and open it." Gu Chengrui immediately bent over and took out a small box from underneath her bed. He opened it and placed it in front of her. Madame Qiao turned her head and looked at the crowd. "Divide this silver into 3 portions. Eldest brother and second brother each have 1 portion. Chengrui and Chenglin each have 1 portion. The rest of the jewelry could be divided equally between Mrs. Lu and Mrs. Yao. Everyone must work together and be a good support for consort. Xian." The last word was almost inaudible, but from the shape of her mouth, everyone could understand what she meant. When the last word fell, Madame Qiao also stopped breathing. Gu Chengrui quickly put away the needle. Everyone saw her reaction and understood what he meant. They pounced on her and cried bitterly, especially second Uncle Gu, who was crying so hard that his nose was dripping with tears. About 15 minutes later, Father Gu stood up and said, "Lu, sister-in-law, put on the shroud for mother. Chengye, Chengji, inform the clansmen." The 4 of them immediately took action when they heard that. Gu Chengrui followed second uncle Gu to the town to buy a coffin. When they returned, the mourning shed had already been built. This time, Gu Chengrui also met Father Gus' new concubine, Qin Shi. She looked like Zhou Zheng and was a smart woman. He heard she was not at home before because she was in town for her birth confinement. Gu Chengrui just greeted her. After introducing himself, he did not say a word to her again. 7 days passed in the blink of an eye. Due to Gu Chungrui and Gu Chengye's relationship, although only a few people were notified, many people still came. Therefore, these 7 days were quite tiring. After that, they set off on their way back to the capital. Chapter 762, Giving Birth to a Daughter in the Blink of an Eye. It was autumn, and the fruits on the farm had ripened. This morning, Gu Chungrui was about to go to the manor to teach everyone how to brew wine when Zhou suddenly felt a pain in her stomach. She quickly stopped him. "Rui, don't go. I think I'm going to give birth." "Huh? That quickly?" Gu Chungrui was stunned. After he reacted, he quickly asked Zhu to call Mother Qiu and the midwife over. He helped Zhou sit on a chair and took her pulse. After a while, his hand trembled. "You're really going to give birth, but it looks like it's still early. Let me help you walk around the courtyard." "All right." After Zhou finished speaking, she slowly walked out with him. Not long after, Mother Qiu and the midwife rushed over. They quickly set up the delivery room and prepared everything they needed. Zhou Ying's contraction had also begun when they were almost done with their preparations. After Gu Chungrui sent her into the delivery room, he rechecked her pulse. After confirming there was no problem, he handed her to the midwife and said, "I'm a doctor. They'll wait outside. Call me if there's anything." "Ah, don't worry, master." The midwife nodded and got busy. Gu Chungrui walked out of the delivery room after that. Zhou Ying's scream was heard when he stepped out the door. Gu Chungrui was so scared that his legs went weak. Then, he leaned against the pillar in the veranda and stared at the delivery room. Update on Biomicron X0VL. Siamicronim he looked at the servant girls, who came in and out with hot water basins. 2 hours later, with the loud cry of a baby, their eldest daughter was born. Gu Chungrui immediately got up and ran in, frightening Mother Qiu. Seeing that it was him, she immediately smiled. "Congratulations, master. It's a daughter. Both mother and daughter are safe." Thank you. I'll go in and take a look." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he immediately ran in. Mother Qiu wanted to stop him at first. After all, the delivery room was a place that men shouldn't enter. However, before she could say anything, he had already gone in. After Gu Chungrui entered the room, the midwife and the servant girls were almost done cleaning up. When she saw him enter, she immediately smiled and went forward. "Congratulations, master. Mistress is blessed, and the birth went very smoothly." "Thank you. Please wait outside for a moment." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he walked to the bed. When he saw the exhausted Zhou Ying, he sat down and took her pulse. "Take care of the child. I want to sleep." Zhou Ying opened her eyes and said, "Go to sleep. I'll take care of the child." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he kissed her forehead and tucked her in. He got up and looked at the baby in the cradle. The baby was dirty and red with blood, and she looked pretty ugly, truth be told. But no matter how he looked at her, she looked all too adorable. He smiled and kissed her little fist. After checking her pulse and confirming that nothing was wrong, he kissed her again before turning around and walking out. When he arrived outside, he saw the midwife waiting outside. He took 2 silver ingots from his wallet and handed them to her. The midwife immediately stood up and smiled. "Master, you're too polite. This is what a midwife should do. Since you are a doctor, then I will take my leave." To be honest, it was not that she had never received such a high amount of thank you money before, but that was after a difficult birth. She had never seen such a generous person, and the rumors seemed true. The relationship between the husband and wife was excellent. Even when Zhou Ying gave birth to a daughter, Gu Chungrui wasn't unhappy even one bit. How would she know that not only did Gu Chungrui not value sons over daughters, but he preferred having a cute daughter? Not to mention, she was their first child in 2 lifetimes. Chapter 763, The Gu family arrives in the morning. Gu Chungrui stayed in the house for the whole morning. After confirming that Zhou Ying was not in danger, he went to the kitchen to give some instructions. In the afternoon, he rushed to the manor. After teaching Head Fong how to brew wine overnight, He rushed back the following day. After dinner, he personally brought in a bowl of sesame oil and pork liver soup, together with a bowl of rice. You must be hungry. Hurry up and eat. Did you follow the recipe for a delivery confinement meal? Zhouing glanced at the things he had brought in. Yes, it's nutritious, and it can also help with your discharge. It's a good thing. After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he wanted to feed her. Zhouing smelled the fishy smell of the pig liver. She immediately frowned and said, "This is too smelly. How can I eat it? Let's make do. We'll cook it next time. It'll definitely be nutritious and delicious." Zhouing tried to taste it, but she quickly spat it out. She pushed it away and said, "Hurry up and make it then. I don't want to eat this. It tastes too bad." "All right, we'll make you a cup of brown sugar water first. Remember to drink it while it's hot. We'll make it again for you now." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he carried the food out. However, although the food he made still smelled, it wasn't too bad. Zhouing had no choice but to pinch her nose and eat it. Just as she put down his bowl, the baby woke up. "All right, our little princess is awake." After saying that, Gu Chungrui carried her from the cradle and handed her over. "Don't call her that," Zhouing reminded him. "It might cause a misunderstanding." Update on Biomicron X0VL. Siamacronim Gu Chungrui was stunned for a moment. He raised his hand and patted his mouth. They were in a feudal dynasty, so he couldn't call their daughter that. He hesitated momentarily before saying, "Let's call her Guagua. Gua means fruit, and she's the fruit of our love. It's also the season of autumn harvest, where fruits are plentiful." Guagua. It sounds like a boy's name, Zhouing commented as she fed the baby. "Neutral, not too masculine. They'll follow you. They'll leave her main name to you too. All right, put her to sleep after you feed her. I have to prepare to report the good news." After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. Then, he began to prepare invitations for their celebration. However, because there were no elders on both sides, Gu Chungrui brought Mother Chu to give Guagua a simple bath. Therefore, the invitation was for Guoguo's 1-month-old birthday. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed. Through Gu Shengrui's meticulous care, Zhouing clearly felt that her body was much better and her energy had also recovered. Zhouing also resumed her work in her inner space at night. Of course, Gu Chungrui would take care of the physical labor. One morning, Zhouing had just finished a bowl of red bean soup when Shizhu walked in and reported, "Master, Mistress, people from your hometown came. They said that they are from your father and uncle's family." Gu Chungrui was surprised to hear that and figured out they might have come for the child. He quickly stood up and said, "Help clean this place up. We'll go and invite them personally." "Yes, master." Shizhu nodded and tidied up the room as Zhouing changed into a set of clean clothes. When they were almost done, Mrs. Liu, Mrs. Yao, and Mrs. Yang each carried a bag and walked in. Zhouing saw this and wanted to get up. "Don't move," Mrs. Liu said hurriedly. "You mustn't catch a cold at this time." "Yeah, we're not outsiders. Just sit there in peace." Mrs. Yao echoed. She walked over and sized her up. "Your little face is so rosy. It looks like you've recovered quite well." "Yeah, it's mainly because of Shengrui's herbal dishes." Zhouing smiled and replied. Chapter 764 Gift, Herbal Dishes? Mrs. Yao asked in surprise. "Yes, herbal dishes. He said that I'm lacking nutrition after giving birth, so I need to make up for it as soon as possible. Eldest sister-in-law, why didn't you bring your children here?" "I was afraid that they would cause a ruckus, so I didn't let them come." Mrs. Yang smiled. "Ah, the children are still young and are noisy. Let them follow your second uncle in the outer courtyard." Mrs. Yao echoed. She looked at the cradle and asked, "I heard that he gave birth to a daughter. Her name is Guagua?" "Yeah, she's quite a lively girl." Zhouing replied with a smile. "It's normal. She's just a baby, and babies cry when they need something." After saying that, Mrs. Liu gathered the 3 bags and added, "Oh, right, this is a little gift from us. It's also from the clan, too." After saying that, she opened the 3 bags and began to take them out. There were baby clothes, shoes, blankets, and even a cloak. There were also some gold accessories, mainly bracelets and longevity locks. However, only Mr. Gu, second Uncle Gu, and the village chief's gifts were made of gold. The rest were all silver. Help me thank everyone when we go back. They'll make up for it the next time we go back. Zhouing, Mrs. Yang asked in surprise. Don't tell me you're the one who's feeding the child? Yes. Cheng Rui said it's good for both the mother and the child's health to feed the child personally. They will be stronger and more resistant to diseases. Is there such a thing? I'm not too sure either. They'll just do as he says. Besides, when I feed my daughter, our bond will deepen. That's true. After chatting for a while, Zhouing also knew that they didn't just come to visit, but also help transport a large amount of chili and cumin. After the baby woke up, the three of them looked at each other. They stood up and said, "She's awake. We won't disturb you anymore. Welcome and see you later." All right, you have to stay for a few more days. When the full moon comes, do help us entertain the guests. That's not a problem. Take your rest. We're leaving. After they left, Zhouing lay down and began to feed the baby. After a while, Gu Chungrui walked over and said, "Babe, there are too many people here. There isn't enough food at home, so I'm going to bring them to a restaurant to eat later. I won't be able to cook lunch for you." How many came? Father, Mrs. Liu, second uncle, his wife, eldest brother's family of 4, Chengxi, and Gu Ziqiang. However, Gu Ziqiang is seasick, so she didn't come to see you. Go ahead. If we can't arrange them a guest house, let them stay in the east courtyard. The possibility of wanting coming back to stay is low. That's exactly what I will be doing. You should rest. I'll make the arrangements now. After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. After he left, Zhouing called Shi Zhu in and asked her to put away the things Mrs. Liu and the others had brought. In the blink of an eye, Guoguo was 1 month old. At the same time, Guoguo's official name was also decided. She was called Gu Yunxia. Early in the morning, Zhouing asked someone to prepare a bath. However, she did not take a bath outside because the weather was cold. Instead, she asked Gu Chungrui to watch over the baby and went inside her inner space to bathe. When she finished breakfast, Princess Mingyu rushed over with her maidservants. When she saw Guoguo, she exclaimed happily, "Sister Zhou, what a cute baby you gave birth to. This child's eyes are like gems, black and shiny." Chapter 765, 1 month old, 1. A child is like a piece of white paper. Her eyes are clear and bright, so of course, she looks good. You're about to give birth, aren't you? Zhouing asked. That's right. My imperial mother said that there's less than a month left. You have to be careful. Stay in this room and don't go out later. Don't knock into something. That's what I thought too. They'll watch over the baby today. After saying that, Mingyu asked the servant girl beside her to open a square box. This is a little toy for her. Don't mind it. Okay? How could that be? It's inlaid with high-quality white jade. But isn't it too expensive for a baby? It's nothing. If she likes it, she can wear it for a lifetime. After chatting for a while, Zhouing also learned that the northern border had started to have conflicts again. Soon, elderly Consort Un and Consort Un walked in together, giving Guoguo a gold-inlaid jade safety lock. After a few polite greetings, Consort Un went over to show concern for Mingyu. Zhouing also knew from her conversation with elderly Consort and that her high blood pressure had acted up. She wanted to find Gu Chungrui to take her pulse and prescribe some medicine to bring back, apart from celebrating Guoguo's month-old birthday. Zhouing reminded her, this disease is easy to relapse when the seasons change. You have to be careful. Don't catch a cold. Especially in the morning, you must wait for the sun to rise and the cold air to dissipate before coming out. Now that it's foggy, catching a cold will be detrimental to your body. That makes sense. I just rushed into the palace the morning before yesterday and felt uncomfortable when I came back. If there's an emergency, wear a hat or a headscarf. All right, they'll remember this. Following that, many more people came in one after another. However, they were afraid of disturbing the baby, so they quickly went outside. Zhouing received a lot of jewelry on Guoguo's behalf. When it was almost time to eat, Niu Fuguwei suddenly ran in from outside and shouted, "Consort Xian is here." Gu Chengrui immediately stood up and bowed. Then, he noticed that Eunuch Qian had also come down from the carriage behind him and gave him a simple bow. Eunuch Qian returned the greeting. "Lord Gu, you are too polite. I am here today on behalf of the Emperor and the Empress to congratulate you. Welcome, please come in." After Gu Chengrui finished speaking, he led them in. After Gu Wanning entered, she walked straight to the main courtyard with Chun Shi. When everyone saw her, they immediately stood up and bowed. After Gu Wanning returned the greeting to elderly consort and the other elders, she turned around and walked into the bedroom. Zhou and Mingyu were about to stand up and bow when Gu Wanning waved her hand. "No need. We'll take a look at my niece first." After saying that, she walked up to Guagua. Guagua happened to be awake. When she saw her gorgeous outfit, she immediately smiled and stretched out her hand. Gu Wanning smiled. "Guagua, since you like me so much, I'll give you a little gift." After saying that, she put a jade pendant on her neck. However, she realized that Guagua was still staring at her, and her small hands scratched at her. Gu Wanning picked her up curiously. Guagua grabbed the red coral tassel on Gu Wanning's hairpin when she lowered her head. Zhou quickly stepped forward and lifted Guagua up. She took her over and said, "Stinky girl, you dare to grab anything. It's okay. If she likes it, just give it to her. It's just a hairpin." After Gu Wanning finished speaking, she was about to pull it down. "Don't. Not to mention that you can't mess up your appearance. We can't spoil her either. Otherwise, it'll be troublesome if she becomes a little tyrant." Zhou quickly stopped Gu Wanning. Guagua might have sensed that the thing she liked was about to fly away. Her little mouth pouted, and she immediately started crying. Chapter 766, 1 month old, 2. I used to hear from my mother that children like things with bright colors. I didn't expect it to be true, Mingyu said with a smile. After saying that, she took off the coral bracelet she was wearing and waved it in front of Guagua. As expected, Guagua immediately stopped crying. She grabbed it and stuffed it into her mouth. Zhou immediately snatched it over and returned it to Mingyu. Children put everything they catch into their mouths. Don't let them take hold of something. Mingyu shook her head. If she likes it, then keep it. It's just nice. When she cries, we can coax her. Seeing that Guagua was about to cry again, Zhou immediately stuffed the red rag doll she had prepared into her arms. The little girl immediately stopped crying and started tearing the doll with both hands. "It looks like Guagua likes red." Gu Wanning smiled. "Yeah." Zhou nodded and took out a beautiful rag doll resembling a small watermelon. Guagua immediately grabbed it in her hand and started playing with it. She sure knows how to play. After the three of them chatted, Gu Wanning went to look for Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao. Soon, the banquet began. Zhou carried her baby out and walked around the banquet to let everyone recognize her. Coincidentally, Guagua had also started crying. She toasted everyone with water instead of wine and carried Guagua back to her room. At this time, everyone also noticed the abnormality. Elderly consort and looked at Mrs. Yao beside her and asked, "Is Zhou breastfeeding her daughter?" "Yes." Chengrui said that if a biological mother takes care of their baby, their body will recover faster, and it will be good for the baby's health. However, they also have nannies ready for the baby's care. Mrs. Yao replied with a smile. Everyone was amazed when they heard this. However, there was no evidence, so they did not seek an explanation. Instead, they lowered their heads and ate. Of course, those who knew about Gu Shengru's medical skills took this to heart. The most obvious ones were Mingyu and Gu Wanning, who decided to give it a try in the future. While Guagua was asleep in the afternoon, Zhou and Gu Chengrui sent the guests away. After finishing her work, Mrs. Yao directly collapsed on the chair. "I haven't dealt with those people for many years. This sudden contact is really physically and mentally exhausting. It's been hard on you guys today. Think about what you want to eat, and let's have a good gathering tonight." Zhou asked after pouring a cup of chrysanthemum tea for each of them. "That's true. You couldn't eat anything before. Now that you're out of confinement, we can finally have a meal together." Why don't we have a hot pot tonight? It's been a long time since we've had that. Good gracious. Once you open your mouth, you've blocked everyone's suggestion. Mr. Gu then asked, "Oh right, do you have prawns, fish, and so on? You can have some of that. If you want to eat, just go ahead and order. We have a restaurant. If we don't have those ingredients at home, we can just go to the restaurant and take them." Gu Chengrui added, "Let's go together." Gu Chengji replied, "Yeah, let's go now. Bring Chengxi along and take some of everything." After Gu Chengrui finished speaking, he led them out. When Mr. Gu and second Uncle Gu saw this, they returned to their rooms to rest. Zhouing chatted with Mrs. Yao and the others. Only then did she know that the two families had already separated after Mrs. Qiao's death. They came over this time to marry Gu Ziqiang to someone in the capital, and then second uncle's family would move back to the capital one after another. After all, the Yao family, the Yang family, the Huang family, and the Sun family were all in the capital. They wanted to come back. Zhouing looked at Mrs. Liu after listening. She was relieved to see that she did not follow. Otherwise, their husband and wife's days would not be so leisurely if they returned. Chapter 767 East Continent. Stable, however, at night, Zhouing learned from Gu Chengrui that it was not that Father Gu and the others did not want to come to the capital, but that they wanted to wait for Gu Chengye to pass the scholar examination before returning to the capital. As for second uncle's family, Gu Chengxi did not like to study. If they waited for Chengxi, they would probably have to wait a long time. Moreover, it was uncertain that he would even pass, so they prepared to enter the capital in advance. "I have to say, father and second uncle are really bold." Zhouing said it with admiration. "Don't they remember the big lesson of the previous raid? Aren't they afraid of implicating Wanning?" Of course, they're afraid, but they're thinking more about the benefits Wanning has brought them. If Wanning can give birth to a prince, the Gu family will be even more glorious than before. Sai, I don't understand. Let's take it one step at a time. Oh, right. Did they find a suitable groom for Ziqiang? Zhouing asked. Not yet. Actually, I think they might as well look for Xilan. Although she's still young, she's second uncle's legitimate daughter. It'll be easier for people to accept her. Ziqiang is not young anymore. If she doesn't marry into the capital, she'll have to find someone in the countryside. No matter what, finding someone in the capital will at least be of some help. That's true. If they don't bring this up, we won't get involved. Of course, I don't want to be involved in such a troublesome thing. After everyone had rested at night, the two brought Guagua into the interspace and placed her in the villa. Then, the two of them went to do their things. Especially Zhou Ying. A lot of work awaited her on the mountain and in the fields. After she finished the work in her inner space, she looked around the warehouse and found that the faith points on the East Continent had suddenly increased a lot. She looked over curiously and realized that fat chickens were rooming everywhere in the capital of the East Continent. Each rooster was about 20 pounds. Moreover, the chicks that hatched from the batch of eggs released before the new year had already begun to lay eggs, reproducing at a terrifying speed. This faith was produced by the farmers who had raised these chickens from scratch. Then, she looked to the north. At this time, the civil strife there had ended, and the first prince was the one who ascended the throne. However, due to the lack of production, there were still many places where food was unavailable. This was also the root cause of the repeated conflicts at the border. Zhouing found a few of the poorest tribes and left them potatoes, hoping the border would be stable. After she finished that, she tried looking for King Hui, but she failed to find him. She wondered where he was hiding. She glanced at the emperor one last time. It was already late at night, and the emperor had settled down at Consort Xian's place. Zhouing especially took a look at his luck. One ball of black fog was left in his purple aura. She left and returned to the villa. Rue, do you think the Su family had the intention of rebelling back then? Zhouing asked after leaving the inner space. Why would you think that? Zhouing told him about the black fog in the emperor's purple aura. There were 3 balls of black fog before, but now only Majesty Kong is dead and 2 have disappeared. Gu Chengrui hesitated momentarily and replied, "It could be the Su family, the retired emperor, or the seventh prince. However, no matter who it is, they are no longer a threat to the emperor. That's true. No matter what, it has already been destroyed. I just don't know when King Hui will appear. I don't think it will take long. When the North Continent has the ability to fight, he will definitely come forward. After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he pulled her into his arms. Go to sleep. Otherwise, when Guogua wakes up, we'll be busy again. Chapter 768 Smallpox 1. The next day, after Gu Chungrui sent off Mr. Gu, Mrs. Liu, and second Uncle Gu, he went to the hospital to get busy. When free, he would check the restaurant's accounts and the manor. At the same time, he also wrote a letter to Sun Hongliang, writing down the recipe for the vermicelli, fermented bean curd, and chili oil and sending it over through Zhou Weiming's communication channel. Moreover, they had also started to recruit people for the hospital. Some studied medicine, some studied martial arts, and some had good culinary skills. In short, as long as they were helpful to them and had a clean background, he began to recruit them all. As for Mrs. Liu and the others, they rented a small courtyard in the western part of the city and moved out. Zhouing politely sent them off. However, she still had someone send them some pots, pans, food, and vegetables for their housewarming gifts. Then, she left them alone. In the blink of an eye, it was the end of the year, and the wine was successfully brewed. In order to quickly open up the market, Zhouing would bring 2 pounds of gifts to each family and explain the benefits. Sure enough, the love for wine caught on, especially among women. Immediately, someone came to buy more, and Zhouing used the excuse of taking care of Guagua and directly handed the matter to Headfong. At the end of the year, she earned more than 13,000 taels of silver from wine alone. Therefore, when spring was awakening in the second year, Zhouing asked Headfong to expand the grape plantation by another 200 acres. Including the previous ones, it accounted for nearly 400 acres of land planted with grapes. At the same time, news of Gu Wanning's pregnancy came from the palace. Gu Ziqiang's marriage had also been decided. The groom was a minor official in the royal army with over 200 people under him, a local in the capital, Qinwu. Relatively speaking, it was a suitable marriage. On this day, Zhouing was feeding Guagua some mashed potatoes when Gu Chungrui rushed in. There's a smallpox outbreak in the capital city. We have to be very careful now. Smallpox? Zhou Ying's heart jolted after hearing that. Smallpox was a deadly plague in ancient times. The key was that Guagua was still young and had not been given the vaccine yet. Yes, be careful. I have to go to the palace to see the emperor. After Gu Chungrui finished speaking, he hurriedly ran out. Mistress, what should we do now? Guoguo's nanny, Mrs. Lin, asked nervously. We can only prevent it. What's the use of being afraid? Oh, by the way, have you ever had smallpox before? Zhouing asked. No, it has been many years since smallpox appeared in the Ming dynasty. Mrs. Lin shook her head. Go inform the people in the residence and gather everyone. Remember not to say anything unnecessary.
Yes.
Mrs. Lin nodded and hurriedly went to call everyone. At this moment, Guogua saw that Zhouing had stopped feeding her and began to slap her arm. Zhouing met her confused gaze and smiled before she continued feeding her. After she was done feeding her, everyone arrived in the main courtyard. After handing off Guogua to Mrs. Lin, she walked out and asked, Butler Nyo, is everyone here? Yes. Other than the people in the restaurant, everyone else is here. Nyo Fugue stepped forward and replied. Just now, Master came back and said there is a smallpox outbreak in the capital, so from today onwards, no one is allowed to go out unless it's absolutely necessary. If it is necessary to leave the place, change your clothes as soon as possible after you return. You have to boil them with disinfectant before wearing them again. In addition, before she could finish her words, everyone below exploded. Smallpox was something that could kill. Every one of them changed their expressions at the mention of it. Immediately, the crowd below buzzed. Zhouing raised her hand and said, All right, quiet down. Listen to me. Chapter 769 Smallpox 2. Mistress, please continue. Nyofugue said. The other thing is to buy lime powder and sprinkle some on every corner to prevent the disease from breeding. Yes, I will arrange for someone to buy the lime powder. Wait, go in the afternoon. I'll make some protective equipment. After Zhouing finished speaking, she left all the people who knew needlework behind. She opened the warehouse and asked them to make a large number of 3-layer masks with fine cotton cloth. After she was done, she went to the study room and took out a few large jars of disinfectant that Gu Chungrui had made himself. She got someone to carry a jar out and soak all the masks. After drying them, she distributed them to everyone. However, she did not stop at this. She made another batch and planned to send it to the hospital. At the same time, she also made a batch of gloves. She used 2 layers of fabric and added a layer of oil paper in the middle to make it safer to use. On the other end, Gu Chungrui was running all the way to the palace. However, he did not go in when he reached the palace gate. Instead, he told the guards guarding the city from afar about the smallpox in the capital and asked them to go in and inform the emperor. This was so he wouldn't be blamed if someone in the palace was infected. When the guard heard this, he was shocked. He called someone to fill in for him and hurriedly ran into the palace. Eunuch Qian saw the guard running at an urgent speed. His heart thumped as he stepped forward to stop him. What's the matter? Why are you so flustered? Do you know Dr. Gu Chungrui? He said that he discovered smallpox in the capital and asked me to pass this news on to the emperor. Eunuch Qian's face stiffened when he heard that. He strode into the royal study and told the emperor the news. After hearing this, the emperor's hand jolted, and half of the approved memorials in his hand snapped. He hurriedly stood up and asked, "Are you sure?" It was Lord Gu who discovered it. He was afraid of spreading the disease into the palace, so he didn't dare to come in. Eunuch Qian replied. The emperor was very touched when he heard that. At the same time, he believed in Gu Shengrui's medical skills, so he panicked even more. He ordered, "Call all the imperial physicians on duty in the Imperial Academy of Medicine over. In addition, inform the people in the palace that they can only leave and not enter. No one is allowed to enter the back of the palace. Also, inform the empress to monitor the back. From today onward, I will not enter there until the epidemic ends." Yes, we'll make the arrangements now. How should we go back to Lord Gu? Eunuch Qian asked. Let him wait for a while. We'll talk after seeing the imperial physicians. Yes. Eunuch Qian responded and immediately passed down the orders to the eunuchs beside him. When the people from the Imperial Academy of Medicine received the news, they were all so scared that their legs went weak. However, they still ran to the royal study one by one. Tell me first, have any of you ever been infected with smallpox? The emperor asked directly when he saw them enter. After the imperial physicians heard this, they looked at each other and finally shook their heads. After all, it had been a long time since smallpox had been cited. Your Majesty, Lord Gu has just turned 20. Could it be that he has made the wrong diagnosis? Principal Zhou looked up at the emperor. Why don't you go out and confirm it? The emperor asked. Principal Zhou immediately broke out in a cold sweat. However, he also knew this was not the time to chicken out. This was also an opportunity to make contributions. I'm willing to go and share the emperor's worries. Go, but it won't be easy to come back in after leaving the palace. You can discuss it with Gu Chungrui. If it's confirmed to be smallpox, submit a detailed memorial to me as soon as possible. Chapter 770 Smallpox 3. Yes. Principal Zhou responded and turned around to leave. The emperor looked at the remaining 4 imperial physicians and said, Send a message to your families. Do not leave the palace unless there is something important. Yes. The 4 responded and turned around to return to the Imperial Academy of Medicine. The emperor then began to approve the memorials. When Principal Zhou came out, he saw Gu Chungrui and stepped forward to greet him with cupped fists. Greetings. You're here to confirm the condition, right? Follow me. After Gu Chungrui finished greeting him, he brought him to the hospital. He walked to a side courtyard and said, There's a family of 3 inside. They're all infected with smallpox. Be careful when you go in. All right. Principal Zhou nodded and walked in. He saw the people guarding outside, the lime powder scattered on the ground, and the choking smell of disinfectant in the space. He was impressed with Gu Chongrui. At the same time, he became even more vigilant. After entering the house, the smell of disinfectant became even more potent. A 5 or 6-year-old girl squatted by the window and looked outside with a longing expression. At the same time, he realized that there were already several pustules on her face. Young lady, don't move. Let Grandpa take a look at you. The little girl was frightened by him. However, she quickly asked with anticipation, Grandpa, can you cure my illness? Yes, but Grandpa has to see it to treat it. The little girl nodded and stood there obediently. Principal Zhou dared not stand before her to examine her, but stood beside her. At the same time, he asked about the symptoms of the little girl and her family. In the end, he confirmed that it was really smallpox. He was a little flustered. After comforting the girl, he immediately turned around and ran out. When he reached the exit, the gatekeeper took a broom and sprinkled disinfectant on his body. Principal Zhou was stunned for a moment. He stood there obediently and waited. Finally, he asked for some disinfectant and rubbed his hands before leaving the small courtyard. He walked to Gu Chongrui, who was not far away. It's smallpox. Did you find anyone else with the same symptoms? Not yet. I've asked them about their whereabouts. Fortunately, they've only stayed in Northern City. So what we need to do now is seal the city as soon as possible. The authority required is too great, so I can't make the decision. That was why I went to look for the Emperor. All right, let's think of a complete plan as soon as possible and present it to the Emperor. He's waiting for our memorial. Follow me. Gu Chongrui nodded and brought him to his office. The two of them discussed for almost 2 hours and finally wrote a temporary implementation plan. They quickly presented it to the Emperor. After the Emperor had the memorial disinfected, he opened it and read it seriously. There were 3 main points. First, close down the entire capital, even the docks and all the passages out of the capital. Second, implement regional quarantine to prevent widespread infection. Third, and most importantly, find the source of the infection as soon as possible. Finally, there was the treatment plan, and the prescriptions for each stage were attached. It was written in detail and concisely. After reading it, the Emperor also confirmed that Gu Chongrui was the leader of this plan, because many of the ideas were novel and bold. He smiled and began to pass out the imperial edicts one by one. After he was done with his work, the retired emperor walked in with the support of eunuch Li. Father, why are you here? The emperor hurriedly went forward and helped the retired emperor sit down. Ahem, I heard rumors from the palace that smallpox was discovered in the capital, so I came to ask if it's true. Yes, Gu Chongrui and Principal Zhou have confirmed it. Chapter 771 Smallpox 4. The retired emperor's expression froze. The last time smallpox appeared in the capital was when I was 5 years old. It spread quickly, and very few people survived. In my opinion, it's better to quickly send your wives to a manor to hide. Take a look at the memorial they submitted first. After the emperor finished speaking, he handed the memorial to his father. In other words, there's no place that's completely safe right now. After the retired emperor finished reading it, he seriously pondered for a moment. Yes, the northern part of the capital is the most dangerous place right now. Let's wait quietly for a few days and see if we can control it. All right, let's give it 7 days. If you can't control it after 7 days, send the masters of the harem out to hide. All right, the emperor replied. After that, the retired emperor took the initiative to stay in the side hall. How could he be at ease waiting at the back for such a crucial matter? At the same time, the imperial edict was issued, and teams of soldiers and imperial guards were dispatched. Very quickly, the capital was isolated and supervised by districts. At the same time, Lord Yin and Yin Jiwu also sent out their subordinates to surround the entire capital. After Gu Chongrui and Principal Zhou sent letters to their families, they went straight to Northern City. They brought all the doctors to Northern City and began providing free medical treatment to find the source of the infection. Damn it! Sun Wenhao cursed after receiving the news at a manor on a western mountain. Why can't the emperor play his cards according to the rules? Second master, someone said, I heard that the royal guards have left the palace. The defense of the palace must be at its weakest now. Why don't we send people to barge our way into the palace? Won't it be more intimidating this way? What do you know? The emperor is not stupid. No matter what, he will leave backup to guard him. Moreover, the royal guards did not leave the city. They could rush back quickly. At that time, we will become turtles in a jar. So we just wait? Yes. Since he won't send people out, let's just wait for the smallpox to enter the palace. I don't think it will take long. Sun Wenhao laughed sinisterly. After Zhouing learned that Gu Chengruei would not be back for a while, she had no choice but to send someone to send him clothes, toiletries, masks, gloves, and other items. After Gu Chengruei received the things, he did not hog the masks and gloves. Instead, he gave one to every doctor, including Principal Zhou. Principal Zhou looked at the things in his hands and felt complicated because he had only just realized that his abandoned daughter was genuinely outstanding. The son-in-law he found was not bad either. He did not seem inferior to him in terms of medical skills. Gu Chengruei didn't know what he was thinking. He followed the trail of new patients, combined it with the trail of the family of 3 from before, and finally found an intersection. In a small tavern, Gu Chengruei immediately brought his men to look around. When he found out a waiter was sick and asked for leave, he immediately rushed to the waiter's house. Only then did he realize that the waiter had lived alone and died at home. Moreover, he could no longer see his original appearance because of the pustules on his body. Gu Chengruei quickly looked at the manager at the side and asked, Is he your original employee, or did you hire him recently? A recent recruit, and only about a month. At this point, the manager seemed to have realized something. He kneeled and said, Sir, this has nothing to do with me. I really don't know anything. Take everyone in the tavern away and quarantine them. After Gu Chengruei finished speaking, he left and asked someone to bring 2 big bags of lime powder. He scattered the powder everywhere around the courtyard and wrapped the corpse in a blanket. Then, he found a place to burn it. Gu Chengruei went into the house personally and did a spot check. Unfortunately, he did not find anything useful. Chapter 772 Smallpox 5. Gu Chengruei asked the neighbors. The person's name was Sun Liang, and he had been working as a clerk in the grain store. After the disaster, he was the only one left in the house. He was fired because he drank too much before the new year and delayed a significant business deal. He had been working part-time recently and only found a job at a tavern a few days ago. Gu Chengruei saw that an auntie knew the deceased well, and he asked, Have you seen anyone with him recently? I'm really not sure about that, but he has a few friends who often drink with him. Why don't you ask them? Perhaps they might know. Thank you. I'll have to trouble you to point the way. The auntie did not wait and immediately led the soldiers to search for them. Soon, 3 people were found. One of them was dead, and although the other 2 were not dead, they were already unconscious. After asking around, they were all single. Gu Chengruei immediately brought in more men to deal with the dead bodies. As for the 2 people who were still alive, they were carefully disinfected and quarantined. He found the place where the 3 of them worked. It was a grain shop and a carpenter shop. The people in the carpenter's shop were fine. They were still alive and well, but they were still quarantined. After that, Gu Chengruei brought his men to the grain shop. However, it was empty. When they reached the grain shop manager's house, they found that the manager was already dead. After asking the neighbors, he learned that the manager's family had all returned to their hometown a month ago. The manager had mentioned that since his shop did not make money, he was selling the shop to return to his hometown. When Gu Chengruei heard this, he immediately sent someone to the government to investigate the manager's background. If he hadn't investigated, he wouldn't have known the origin. He was shocked. This grain shop and manager originally belonged to the Marquis of Dingon. But after the disaster, The manager bought the shop from the Marquis of Dingon and started his own business. Gu Chengrui could not help but mutter. Could it be that King Hui had returned, and that he had deliberately started this epidemic? He immediately told the emperor his findings. After the emperor received the news, he was shocked. What should have come is finally here. Fortunately, I didn't send my wives out to hide. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have fallen into a trap. After that, he gave Gu Chengrui his gold medal and gave him full authority to handle this matter. After Gu Chengrui received the gold medal, everything became more convenient. He arranged for all the districts in the capital to go under lockdown and started a door-to-door check to eliminate hidden dangers. After he was done for the day, he took off his gloves and had a meal. He grabbed the pendant hanging around his neck and told Zhouing about his suspicion of this epidemic. He also asked her to help investigate and see if she could find the whereabouts of King Hui and the others. After Zhouing received the news that night, she huffed, as expected of King Hui. His methods are so cruel and ruthless. He doesn't take human lives seriously. Fortunately, he did not have the destiny to be the emperor, or else the country would definitely suffer. After that, she searched the entire capital. After 4 hours, she finally found Sun Wenhao and his group in the village in the western suburbs. There weren't many people, only about 100 or so. However, looking at the murderous look on their faces, it seemed that they were all fugitives. What puzzled her was that she actually saw through his disguise. It seemed the reason she couldn't find King Hui last time was that he had escaped quickly, not because she had been careless. After she found him, she glanced at Gu Chengrui. Seeing that he was sleeping soundly, she did not disturb him. She only told him the results after she had breakfast with Guogua the next day. On the other end, Gu Chengrui received the news from Zhouing and had a headache. He thought that those people would be in the capital, not in a manor. What should he do now? The problem was that he could not start a massive search. If he let them escape, it would be difficult to catch them again. This news must not be leaked. Chapter 773 Smallpox 6. Dr. Gu, the 2 people who were quarantined yesterday have woken up. One of them wanted to hit the wall and commit suicide, but he failed because of his fever. Oh, so he's guilty. Gu Chengrui immediately stood up after he finished speaking. This was an excellent opportunity that had come knocking on his door. He had to interrogate it properly. Even if they couldn't find anything, they just needed him alive. After that, he did not even bother to finish his breakfast. After washing up, he took his vaccine and hid the needle. He put on the mask and gloves that he had cleaned last night and went over to look for him. When he saw the person who was tied up, he stepped forward and said, "You're so eager to die, and that means you must know something. As long as you tell me, they'll give you a quick death. Otherwise, you can only stay and be my test subject." When Gu Chengrui said this, he looked at his confused expression and paused. "You don't know what a test subject is? What about a poison tester? Every doctor hopes to have a poison tester so that they can research medicine faster." The man looked at him in fear. Although he had never seen a poison tester before, he had heard many people mention it. It was said that some poison testers were tortured to the point where they no longer looked like humans. The key was that none of them could live long. It just so happens that I've been researching a type of poison recently. It's said that if this poison gets to you, you'll be as cold as ice every night, especially on a full moon. It's okay. Don't say anything. We'll go get it now. After Gu Chengrui finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. The man subconsciously thought of the snow disaster. He was almost frozen to death at that time, and he did not want to live that kind of cold life again. Don't. They'll talk. Remember, if there's a lie, they'll give you 10% of that poison. No, I want. About a month ago, our manager brought back a piece of clothing in a panic. He put it on the next day and said that he was going to sell the shop and return to his hometown. He had even sent his family back. After a few days, he was down with a high fever. The 2 of us would persuade him to find a doctor quickly. He ignored us, and he also started to drink. One night, after the 2 of us had had a drink, he told us the truth. He had smallpox, and there was no cure. When I heard that, My heart trembled. I asked curiously, "You haven't seen a doctor before. How do you know?" The manager said that the clothes he had brought back previously were from someone with smallpox. It was the second son of the Marquis of Dingon who had captured his family and forced him to do this in order to spread smallpox. At that time, I was scared silly. I originally wanted to tell the officials, but the manager suddenly threatened me. He claimed that he would say that I did all of this, that he would stuff the clothes into my house, and that he would get the shop assistant to testify for him. Think about it, which shop assistant would dare to oppose the manager? I'm just afraid. So, I didn't dare say anything, but I was also depressed. I gathered a few brothers who were on good terms with me and started drinking. At that time, I finally understood the manager's helplessness. After the items in the shop were quickly sold out, everyone dispersed, and we returned home. I remember that at that time, the manager's face had already started to grow pustules, so I was so scared that I didn't even dare to ask for my salary. Who would have thought that I would also be infected? But I didn't touch him. I didn't even dare touch his things. Why was I still infected? Chapter 774 Smallpox 7. That person even started to sob. Not only can it be transmitted through contact, but it can also be transmitted through saliva and breathing. That's why it's so terrifying. Gu Qingrui replied. That isn't it? That's right. Did the grain shop deal with anyone from outside the capital? Not really. The shop is small, so it mainly sells to nearby residents. By the way, have you heard the manager mention where the Marquis of Dingan's second son is hiding? No, he probably doesn't know either. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been threatened. All right, cooperate with our treatment. You might be able to survive. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. After disinfecting himself, he sent a memorial to the emperor and told him everything he had found. After the emperor received the news, he immediately informed Xiaohong and Yan Jiwu to bring people out of the city to search for Sun Wenhao and his group. As long as they found them, they would be killed without mercy. After the two of them received the order, they immediately gathered their troops and set off, especially the manner related to the Marquis of Dingon. On the other end, Zhouing had been paying attention to Gu Changrui. After receiving the confession, she finally understood the meaning behind Sun Wenhao's words. Therefore, she took advantage of when they gathered for lunch to drug their wine. She quietly found the manager's family and let them out. After the manager's family escaped, they directly reported to the nearby officials that they had been kidnapped. Soon, Yin Jiwu and Xiaohong also received the news and rushed to the manor to arrest them. Xiaohong saw the familiar disguise and immediately removed it from Sun Wenhao's face. After confirming that it was him, the two of them heaved a sigh of relief and brought them back to the capital. After the emperor received the letter, he heaved a sigh of relief. He asked Xiaohong to interrogate him. Where exactly did the smallpox outbreak happen? Otherwise, Sun Wenhao wouldn't have gotten close with the smallpox virus. After confirming that the smallpox was found in a small village on the northern continent and had been cured, the emperor finally heaved a sigh of relief. After the matter was clarified, the next step was treatment. Zhouing did not pay attention to it anymore. Soon, more and more people in Northern City fell ill. Fortunately, it did not spread out of the capital. With the cooperation of Gu Changrui and Principal Zhou, the epidemic was quickly controlled and eliminated. Even if Principal Zhou was indignant when they separated, he had to admit that Gu Shengrui's control of the epidemic was much better than his. The key was that he was swift and decisive in his execution. There was no talk of human feelings. He had a rare talent. What made him even more depressed was that Gu Shengrui's medical skills seemed to be higher than his, even far surpassing his son. Therefore, when they parted ways, he invited him with great reluctance. Through this epidemic, I realized that we have a tacit understanding. In the future, when you have time, come over to my house. We can also discuss medical skills there. Gu Changrui looked at Principal Zhou's kind expression. Not only did he not have a good impression of him, but he was instead filled with disgust. This person was too materialistic, so much so that it made one's heart turn cold. However, Zhouing was still his daughter, so there was no need to make things too ugly. He said, "You should come to the hospital when you have time. There are many patients here. We can have a good discussion." Although Principal Zhou was a little uncomfortable, he still nodded. "All right, they'll come over when there's an opportunity." The next day, after the morning court session, the two made a report to the emperor, which also meant that the epidemic had ended. Chapter 775. A proposal. The emperor nodded his head in satisfaction after hearing this. Then, he rewarded each of them with 10,000 taels of silver. Then, he said, "Go back and study it carefully. See if you can stop smallpox as a whole. Otherwise, once it erupts, it will be a disaster that is no smaller than a natural disaster." Hearing him say this, Gu Chengrui suddenly thought of cowpox. He might as well take the opportunity to suggest this so that it does not happen again. "I have an idea, but it's not mature yet." "Oh, tell me." After the emperor finished speaking, he looked at him expectantly. "I discovered that smallpox will become weaker and weaker as it spreads. For example, this time, the first few people who were infected with smallpox were in a much more severe condition, and the time needed to treat them was also much longer. Moreover, any smallpox transmitted through young adults would accelerate the weakening of the smallpox's toxicity. Therefore, I want to use strong cows and horses to test if the sickness extracted from them can be weaker. If that is the case, could we plant this weakened smallpox into a human body? After all, you would never get smallpox again after being infected once. Even if it doesn't work, it will be relatively simple to treat." The emperor looked thoughtfully at Principal Zhou, who was standing in a daze. "Principal Zhou, you were in the epidemic center. What do you think?" Principal Zhou replied, replying to the emperor, "I really didn't notice. However, the people who were infected later did recover faster. The pustules were also reduced, so I think we can try it." At the same time, he was annoyed. Why didn't he observe carefully? Otherwise, this massive credit would have been his. The emperor's eyes lit up when he heard that. He looked at Gu Chengrui and said, "He'll leave this matter to you, Chengrui. If there's anything you need, just let me know. Go back and accompany your wife. We'll officially start in 3 days."
Yes.
Gu Chengrui nodded. After that, he raised his request, mainly for the venue and the people. He could settle the rest himself. "If there's anything you need help with, just let me know," Principal Zhou asked after leaving the royal study. "Definitely." Gu Chengrui nodded, bade farewell, and went home. After returning home, he changed her clothes and bathed in mugwort leaves before walking to the main courtyard. When he entered, he saw Guogua crawling on the thin blanket. He went forward and picked her up. "Guogua, did you miss Dad?" Guogua looked at him with a confused expression and turned to look at Mrs. Lin. Mrs. Lin was about to take her when Gu Chengrui hugged her and asked, "Where's Mistress?" "She went to the restaurant and said she would return by noon." "Okay, you can go down. We'll play with Guogua for a while." "Yes, if there's anything, please call me." After saying that, Mrs. Lin left and went straight to the east wing. Gu Chengrui lifted Guogua up high and examined her carefully. Our Guogua is really getting more and more beautiful. She doesn't even remember her dad anymore. "Ah, ah," Guogua replied impatiently. At the same time, the saliva in her mouth fell and landed on Gu Shengru's face. Guogua chuckled. "You little rascal. You're so happy just because you did something bad." After Gu Chengrui finished speaking, he pulled her into his arms and wiped his face with a handkerchief beside him. He carried her out of the house. As soon as he stepped out of the door, Guogua was overjoyed. She stretched out her arm and pointed the way. Finally, she arrived at the back garden. When Gu Chengrui saw this, he was elated. How could he not be happy when she was an 8-month-old child who knew the way? His daughter was the smartest. Chapter 776 Father and Daughter Getting Along. Foo. Foo. Guogua pointed at a black and gold butterfly and kept on pointing at it. Her big eyes were fixed on the butterfly, and she couldn't take her eyes off it. Gu Chungrui saw this and walked over with her in his arms. He even grabbed her arm and let her grab it herself. However, butterflies were not so easy to catch. It flew away as soon as they approached. After 4 or 5 stops, Guogua was a little discouraged, even a little angry. The last time, without Gu Chungrui needing to do anything, she directly clawed at the flower. She grabbed a handful of pollen, but the butterfly ran away and flew out of the garden. Guogua pointed in the direction the butterfly had escaped in and wanted to continue to chase after it. Gu Chungrui said, "It flew away. You scratched the little butterfly." After saying that, he even showed her little paws to let her see the yellow powder on her hands. Guogua scratched her hands in confusion, but she still pointed in the direction where the butterfly had flown. Gu Chungrui looked at her stubborn look and felt a headache. He was afraid that she would cry if she was unhappy. He carried her and walked forward. Guogua saw that he was not chasing after the butterfly and immediately snorted in dissatisfaction. Perhaps she was unfamiliar with him, but she did not make a fuss. Instead, she stared at him with her big eyes. Gu Chungrui was getting a little sheepish with her stare. In the end, he brought her to the small pond to look at goldfish. After 2 to 3 years of careful rearing, the fish in the pond not only increased a lot, but also grew a lot bigger. Each fish looked fat and delicious. Guogua was immediately attracted by the goldfish. She pointed at the goldfish and began to cry out. "Go get some fish food." Gu Chungrui raised his head and said to a servant not far away.
"Yes."
The servant responded and immediately ran away. Soon, he brought over some fish food that had been prepared earlier. After Gu Chungrui took it, he broke off a small piece and threw it into the water. In an instant, the fish gathered together and formed a red lump. After a moment, not even a powder was left behind. Guogua saw that the fish had run away and immediately grabbed the pancake in his hand. Gu Chungrui broke some off, crushed it into small pieces, and placed it in her tiny hand. "You can feed it yourself." Guogua immediately threw the fish food into the water with a smile. Although her small hand missed, some fish food still fell into the pond, immediately attracting a group of fish to fight for it. Guogua immediately clapped her hands and laughed. After that, they sat by the pond and began to feed the fish. However, in less than 15 minutes, Guogua whined and wanted to go back. Gu Chungrui was happy to see this. He crushed the remaining fish food and sprinkled it into the water before carrying her back to the main courtyard. After entering the house, he placed her on the ground, poured her a glass of water, and began to feed her. However, Guogua was not in the mood to drink water. Instead, she scratched her body with her tiny hands, looking like she was about to cry. Gu Chungrui also noticed the red spots on her little hand. He grabbed her little hand and rubbed it. After confirming that it was a mosquito bite, he looked guilty. He had been so focused on playing with her that he had completely forgotten about the mosquitoes. He carried her back to the bedroom and took off her clothes. As expected, her small body was covered in red spots from being bitten by mosquitoes. He immediately searched the room and found some cream he had made himself and applied it to her body. He helped her put her clothes back on, and only then did Guogua stop scratching. Gu Chungrui immediately fed her some water and brought her to play around the house. Gradually, the father and daughter got along more and more harmoniously. When Zhouing returned, she had just entered the main courtyard when she heard the sound of them fooling around. Chapter 777 Leaving after entering the house, she saw Guogua rolling around laughing. She went up to them and scolded them. "Gu Chungrui, to think that you're a doctor. Aren't you afraid that she'll get a headache from rolling around?" Gu Chungrui turned his head and saw her. His expression froze as he asked, "You're back?" Zhouing did not scold him anymore. Instead, she picked up Guogua and asked, "Has the epidemic been dealt with?" Gu Chungrui sat up and tidied his clothes. "Other than the virus I left behind, The rest are all destroyed. However, I proposed using cowpox to build immunity, so we'll have to leave for another 2 to 3 months after 3 days. Although Zhouing was reluctant to see him leave, she knew that this was a big deal. She could only answer, "All right. Prepare well in the next 2 days. Bring everything that might be needed." "I will. By the way, Dr. Feng is keeping an eye on the clinic. You don't have to worry about it. You just have to go and take a look from time to time." "Got it." At this point, Zhouing looked at Guagua, who was lying obediently on her shoulder and panting. She glared at him and huffed, "Look at how tired she is. You stay here for a while. I have to wipe Guagua down." After saying that, she carried Guagua into her room and entered her inner space. She readied in some warm water and planned to give Guagua a bath. When she saw the mosquito bite marks on Guagua's body, she knew without a doubt that it was Gu Chungrui who did it. Because Mrs. Lin was a careful person, even if she brought Guagua out, she would bring an anti-mosquito sachet. "Silly girl, do you feel itchy?" Zhouing played with her head and asked. Guagua slapped her hand away in frustration and rubbed her eyes. Zhouing knew that Guagua was sleepy, so she didn't delay any longer. She quickly washed her and applied the ointment again. She quickly changed her into a set of clean clothes, carried her out of her inner space, and placed her on her bed. As soon as Guagua was placed on the bed, she fell asleep. Zhouing covered her with a thin blanket and left the room. Gu Chungrui, who was drinking tea, saw her coming out. He immediately stood up and suggested, "What do you want to eat for lunch? They'll make it." "You must be feeling guilty." Zhouing walked over and teased. "I was so excited to see my daughter that I forgot about mosquitoes." Gu Chungrui laughed dryly. After saying that, he poured her a cup of tea. "Be careful in the future. Children's skin is tender, and their skin attracts mosquitoes the most." "Don't worry, they'll definitely remember it." Zhouing looked at his sheepish appearance and did not say anything more. Instead, she asked, "Do you know where you're going this time?" "If my guess is correct, the Emperor will provide us a remote manor. Bring some medicine to kill mosquitoes and flies, just in case." "All right." For the next 2 days, Gu Chungrui went to the clinic for half a day, accompanied his family for the remaining half day, and made some mosquito-repellent medicine at night. At the same time, Zhouing also prepared 4 sets of summer clothes, a thin quilt, some toiletries, beef jerky, and the silver notes that the Emperor rewarded him this time. On the morning of the 4th day, Guard Shu brought a group of people to pick up Gu Chungrui and set off to a remote manor. Other than food, the manor also arranged for some strong cattle and horses, as well as prisoners. Gu Chungrui didn't waste any more time. After making the arrangements, he distributed the mosquito repellent he had brought and instructed Guard Chu to take care of his protection. He personally picked a cow and a horse and began his experiment. After Gu Chungrui left, Zhouing handed the task of inspecting the manor and shops to Nyo Fugue. She only took the time to visit the clinic. Only if there were any troublesome patients would she let Gu Chungrui know. Chapter 778. Passing on the news in the blink of an eye. 2 months had passed, and it was the middle of the day. The weather was so stuffy that people were annoyed, and Guagua kept crying. During the day, Zhouing did not dare to bring her into the space, so she decided to stay in to avoid the heat. One day, Zhouing and the others were ready to set off when Mingyu rushed over with her son, Zhuangwang. Zhouing saw that her expression was not right. She welcomed her into the house and asked, "What's wrong? Did you two quarrel? Can it be something else?" "I don't owe you money." Mingyu rolled her eyes at her. She waved her hand and chased out all the irrelevant people in the room before saying, "I'm afraid the retired emperor is in trouble. Wanting asked my father to help pass a message. If there's any celebratory event you want to do, hurry up and get it done." "How could that be? Wasn't everything fine before?" "No idea. Someone threw a large amount of ice into the retired emperor's bedroom, and he fell sick from the cold overnight. I heard that he even choked on his lungs. You know that the retired emperor is most afraid of catching a cold at this moment. I heard from my father that he's coughing so much that he can't even speak, and every time he coughs, there's blood." "Wait, This is basically murder. Have they found out who did it? After finding out about a little eunuch, the clues were cut off. I'm afraid it won't be easy to investigate further. Zhouing did not know what to say after hearing this. After all, the retired emperor had offended many people during his reign, so investigating this was difficult. But one thing was for sure, the palace was filled with dirt. After that, the two of them chatted for a while. When Mingyu learned that Zhouing was going to the manor, she said, "Let's go together. We can have company then." "All right, pack up quickly. We'll set off early tomorrow morning." "No problem, it's a deal." After Mingyu finished speaking, she brought her son back to pack her things in a hurry. Meanwhile, Zhouing put down Guagua and went out with some food. She went to second Uncle Gus' house in West City. Mrs. Yao saw her enter, paused, and greeted her with a smile. "Yinger, you're here. Come in and take a seat." "Thanks," Zhouing replied. After handing the food to her, she followed her into the house. "I heard that you opened a pastry shop in Northern City. How's business?" "It's not bad, as we mainly sell common treats. Now, mung bean cakes are in short supply every day." "That's good. With a living, things will slowly get better." "Oh, right. Where's Ziqiang?" Zhouing asked. "She's helping out in the shop. She left me at home to take care of the two children." Has her pre-wedding rites been completed? It has. Did something happen? Mrs. Yao asked. Ziqiang is 17 now, right? Yes, she's been in mourning for your grandmother for a year. That's why her wedding was delayed. Hold her wedding ceremony as soon as possible, just in case. What happened? I heard that the retired emperor is sick. Mrs. Yao was shocked after hearing this and swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. This matter could not be spread simply. Zhouing was quite satisfied. She stood up and said, "Guagua is still at home. We'll go back now." "Wait, it's already noon. Why don't you have a meal before you leave?" "No, Guagua won't eat properly if I don't go back. Thank you for the offer." After Zhouing finished speaking, she stood up and walked out. The moment she left, Mrs. Yao started to panic. She had also heard a little about the retired emperor's situation. His body simply couldn't take it anymore. What if? It seemed that this marriage had to be held as soon as possible. The key was that the two of them were not young anymore. Who knew what would happen if they kept mourning for another 3 years? Chapter 779 Summer Escape. After picking up Xiao Jie from school at night and letting him look after her younger brother, Xiao Hao, she went to Qin Wu's house at the right time and told him about the matter. The next day, Qin Wu deliberately checked, but he found nothing. However, when he heard that the marriage of the princess of King Xian's family had been brought forward, Qin Wu immediately realized that this matter might be true. Therefore, he immediately found a matchmaker and brought forward the wedding 10 days later. After receiving the news, Mrs. Yao immediately prepared a dowry for Gu Ziqiang. On the other end, Zhou Ying and Mingyu brought their children to the largest manor under her name, the breeding farm she had taken over from King Hui. The manor was massive. There was no smell as the main courtyard was far away from the breeding area. Mingyu looked at the luxurious two-door courtyard in front of her. As expected of the rich and imposing King Hui, this courtyard is not big, but the cost is definitely extravagant. Yeah, and the interior has been renovated. You can live in comfort. After Zhouing finished speaking, she carried Guagua toward the main courtyard. When Mingyu saw this, she immediately followed. Because no man was around, they stayed in the east and west rooms, respectively. As soon as they unpacked, the head of the manor, Head He, came over. Zhouing carried Guagua to the front. "Greetings, mistress." Head He immediately bowed when he saw her coming out. "Please, get up. There's no need to be so polite. Is everything all right in the manor?" "It's going well. I was just about to tell you that the early maturing peaches and plums are about to ripen. Do you think we can pick them?" "That's right. It's almost the season. You can start looking for people now. Remember to pick them before they are fully ripened, especially the peaches. Pick them when they're 80% ripe, or they won't be able to be stored until they are sold." "I will remember it," Oh, right, and those livestock. It's too hot now, so you must pay attention to hygiene and prevent mosquitoes and flies. Also, get more dandelions, honeysuckles, and other heat-clearing and detoxifying medicines to prevent any sickness. They'll make the arrangements now. Go. We will stay at the manor for a few days. Get someone to send some fresh vegetables and meat over every day.
Yes.
Hiyuan responded and turned to leave. Zhouing returned to her room. After a while, Hiyuan's wife came over with 2 servant girls, a basket of coal, a chicken, some eggs, and a carp. In the evening, Zhouing cooked dinner personally. She readied steamed egg custard for the 2 children, sweet and sour fish, chicken stewed with mushrooms, and garlic and coal. After dinner, she smoked out the mosquitoes in the yard and played with the 2 children. The 2 children were quite happy to play together. Mingyu smiled when she saw this. Whoa, it's much cooler in this manner. At least there's a little breeze. I think I can sleep soundly at night. Indeed, there are too many people in the capital, making it hot. It's much better when we are here. But don't open the curtains at night. The wind from the mountain is still quite wild. It'll be troublesome if you catch a cold. I'll remember it. By the way, have you seen Wanting recently? I have. Every time I visit the palace to visit Empress Dowager, I will see her. She complained more than once that you hadn't visited her in 3 to 4 months. Maybe after the new year, as Chungrui is busy every day. I had to care for Guagua, so I don't have the time. I think you're just lazy and think the palace has too many rules. Oh, don't blow my cover. But it is part of the truth. In the past, Guagua was still young and could be taken care of by a nanny. Now that she's older, she's very clingy. She wouldn't eat properly without me. Chapter 780 Gifts. Mingyu didn't say anything after hearing that. Zhuang had been quite clingy ever since he started to recognize people, which could be a result of her feeding him personally. However, this feeling of being needed was not bad. The next morning, Zhouing and Mingyu went out for a jog around the manor. After confirming that the place was in line with their standards, Zhouing turned her head and asked, Mingyu, do you want to go up the mountain to take a look? Of course. I heard the peaches are ripe, so I want to bring 2 back for the 2 children to try. Mingyu nodded. When they arrived at the mountain, Zhouing found that the peaches and plums were ready to be picked, and they were not small. She picked the best peaches on the treetops, and she picked more than 10. After descending the mountain, Mingyu brought the peaches back to the main courtyard. Zhouing went to the manor and asked Head He to organize people to pick the rest of them quickly. In the afternoon, Zhouing picked out a few baskets of the best peaches in color and size. She carefully packed it and loaded a large amount of ice into the carriage, asking Shizhu to send the fruits into the palace. The rest were divided into 3 grades. The first grade fruits were carefully placed in baskets, ready to be sold to wealthy families. The second grade ones were sold to the commoner district. The remaining third grade ones were sold at the nearby markets. If they couldn't be sold out, they were sent to restaurants to be made into smoothies and fruit platters. However, Zhouing received a letter from Mrs. Yao just after giving instructions. She could only ask Mingyu, do you want to stay here for a few more days or return to the capital together? Let's go back together. There are many things to do at home. It's already very good to take a break and stay here for a few days. Mingyu replied. Zhouing felt a tinge of guilt in her heart. Since she opened the cake shop, Zhou Huiming has been busier than before. Moreover, he was now helping son Hongliang open up noodle shops everywhere. After arriving in the capital, Mingyu got someone to send over a piece of silver jewelry as a wedding gift for Gu Ziqiu. When it was Zhou Ying's turn, she was a little troubled because her wedding gift to Gu Ziqiu and Gu Zishan was too simple back then. If she gave Gu Ziqiu too much now, Mrs. Yao and Mrs. Liu would feel uncomfortable. However, it would not match their current status if it were too simple. She thought of the 1-month-old gift they had given Guagua. After much consideration, she gave her 2 batches of good fabric and a set of gold jewelry. The monetary gift was set at 100 taels, so Mrs. Yao would not complain. That afternoon, Zhouing sent the things over. As expected, Mrs. Yao did not say anything on account of the 100 taels of silver. Mrs. Huang even warmly invited her to sit down and drink tea. When did Annie Huang come over? Asked Zhouing. Yesterday. It was a little rushed. Indeed. Where are second uncle and the others? They're entertaining a few relatives tomorrow. They've gone to buy things separately. There are plenty of things in the restaurant. If you lack anything, let me know in advance. I'll get them to bring some. All right. By the way, I made 2 sets of clothes for Guagua. You can take them back. After speaking, Mrs. Huang returned to her room and took out 2 sets of tiny clothes. The clothes were a doo-doo and shorts. The red doo-doo had a black puppy embroidered, and the green shorts had vines embroidered. It was a beautiful match. After chatting for a while, Mr. Gu and the others rushed back. When they saw her, Mr. Gu sat down and asked, Zhouing, will Chung Rui be back tomorrow? Chapter 781, The Retired Emperor's Death. I'm afraid not. Besides, he went to study smallpox. He can't come over for everyone's safety, even if he returns. If there's anything, just look for me. Chung Rui has done great things that will last for thousands of years. If he can't come back, then so be it. Don't we have Changji, Changya, and Chengxi? Second Uncle Gu said. It's just a little regretful. Mr. Gu replied dejectedly. To put it bluntly, he wanted to take this opportunity to have a good gathering with everyone, as he did not know when everyone would be able to get together again. Zhouing then asked if they had prepared enough, and they returned after ordering everything. The next day, she brought Guagua to help for a day. 3 days later, in the early morning, Zhouing was still in a daze when she suddenly heard a series of bells ringing in the direction of the palace. She immediately woke up and spread out her divine sense to take a look. Only then did she know that it was the death bell signaling that the retired emperor had not survived and had passed away. The entire palace was in tears. The Empress Dowager had also fainted, and now the imperial physicians were about to treat her. At this moment, Guagua was also woken up by the noise. She kept hitting the railing of the small bed at her, looking anxious. Zhouing quickly got up and carried her up. After letting her relieve herself, she carried her to the big bed. A moment later, Guagua fell asleep after she had milk. As for Zhouing, she couldn't fall asleep. According to the original owner's memory, the last time the Empress Dowager died, she was buried after 7 days. At that time, everyone in the capital maintained 7 days of mourning, and every family hung white lanterns. Moreover, Gu Chungrui was registered under Princess Ping Yang's registry. Their family would definitely not be able to escape the mourning period. The key was that she had to eat vegetarian food for 49 days. Her restaurant. After Guagua fell asleep, she immediately woke Nyofugue up. She quickly asked him to prepare some white lanterns and cloth for mourning. At the same time, she sent someone to inform the manor that from today onward, no meat, including eggs, would be sent to the restaurant. In addition, the amount of tofu produced should be doubled. When they were all ready, the imperial edict from the palace had already been sent out. As expected, it was according to the standard of the last Empress Dowager's death. However, due to the weather this time, the funeral was changed to last for 3 days, and the mourning period was changed to 100 days. After the meal, the young eunuch who reported the funeral also came over to pass on the imperial edict, asking her to enter the palace as soon as possible to attend the funeral. Seeing this, Zhouing instructed the people in the manor to look after Guagua. She changed into a silver-white dress and blue shoes and followed the young eunuch to the imperial palace. On the way, Zhouing gave the young eunuch 100 taels of silver. If there are any taboos or rules, please enlighten me. No problem. Don't worry, madam. The eunuch took it and nodded. Then, he began to tell her. Zhouing didn't think much of it after hearing. She followed him, picked up the mourning clothes, and found her seat. After entering the palace, Zhouing followed him all the way to the palace where the retired emperor lived. It was also the place where the funeral was held. She went in and mourned with everyone. After that, consort and took her to the side and gave her a white silk to tie around her head. She gave her a linen robe and asked the palace maid to sew 2 pieces of white cloth onto her shoes quickly. In a while, you will follow beside Mingyu. Do whatever she does. Thank you for your advice, Princess Consort. What Princess Consort? Remember to call me Auntie. Don't forget that you are Ping Yang's daughter-in-law now. Don't let those old-fashioned people get a hold of that mistake. Consort and said softly, "You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."